Spacefair. Hey guys, what's up? It's Caleb. This episode is Dr. Jack Sarfatti. It's very physicsy. If you speak physics, you're going to have a really good time. If you don't, you might just enjoy the sprawling tale of Jack's 85 years on Earth, and 70 of those years are pretty UFO-y, so there's a lot of cool crossovers with characters from history and collaborations with names that you've heard of. But some of the math stuff is pretty advanced. It was very advanced for me. I say and okay a lot. Maybe you'll understand more of it than I did. That's the disclaimer for this episode. Hope you enjoy. I also want to just mention that if you are digging the show enough to support us, you can do that at patreon.com/WTUFO. Patreon.com/WTUFO just hook us up with $1 a month. Alternatively, you can check out spacefair.etsy.com and look for cool merch about UFOs or science. And finally, you can share us with your friends, post us on Threads or your favorite platforms, and just help us spread the word. This is a labor of love for us. We're doing it because we think these conversations are important, but it would be super cool if it weren't entirely volunteer. Thank you for listening to the sales pitch. Hope you enjoy the episode. What the UFO? I'm here with Dr. Jack Sarfatti. Jack, it's great to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to meet you too, Caleb.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're a handsome young man.
Oh, thank you. You're an elegant elder man, if I may
Right.
say.
So is your background Scottish? You sort of Scottish-Irish, or?
Yes, my grandmother was half Scotch, half Irish, and there's the Scottish on my father's side as well. So I'm a bit of a mix. Maybe there's some Germanic in there. How about for you?
Yeah, well, Jewish.
Okay.
Jewish Italian, some Arab, a mixture. Oh, Lithuanian, Russian. But you look a little bit like Prince Harry.
Ah, cheers, mate.
You're better looking than Prince Harry. All right.
Thank you. I aspire to be as rakish and charming.
Yeah.
Well, let me just give a quick rundown for folks of your background, and please flag me and correct me if I get any of this wrong.
Yes.
I have your official title as a physics maverick time lord, which I feel goes with your beret and scarf.
Yeah.
That's a joke from Ryan Ragtime.
Ryan Ragtime. Yeah.
That you flagged for me. Okay, so but your actual history is that you got an undergrad in physics from Cornell, master's in physics from UCal San Diego, a PhD in physics from UCal Riverside. Yeah. Then from 67 to 71, you taught physics at San Diego State. Right. And you studied at Cornell Space Science Center, UK Atomic Energy Research Establishment, Max Planck Institute for Physics, and International Center for Theoretical Physics. Yeah. And then you decided to leave academia around this time. You were spending some time in Trieste, is that right?
I was, I kind of decided, but I was triggered by people from the Central Intelligence Agency and the military back then. It's in How the Hippies Saved Physics. That book by, getting into all kinds of crazy stuff, which is still going on even today, of course.
This is right to the fascinating stuff. And of course, that's what I really want to talk to you about. So you mentioned that you're recruited by the CIA in 1974, and I want to dial in on that. Yeah. But I also want to quickly mention you're a longtime habitué of Café Trieste, and you have been involved with the Fundamental Physics Group, the Esalen Institute affiliated Physics Consciousness Research Group, and the 100-Year Starship Project, among, I would imagine, other research projects. And you're published in multiple places with multiple colleagues. So you have a long and storied career, and we're very grateful for you spending some of your time with us and sharing some of your wisdom.
That's hopefully.
So does that sound about right? Did I leave out any major elements?
Yeah, that's good. And I should say also that at the Max Planck Institute, that was with Werner Heisenberg.
Whoa.
It was Werner Heisenberg's institute. And in Trieste, that was with Abdus Salam, who was he got both, of course. Heisenberg, of course, had a Nobel Prize. I'm pretty sure Heisenberg had a Nobel Prize, maybe not, but Abdus Salam got the Nobel Prize for with Weinberg, and I get the Glasgow, I think, for the unified electroweak theory. But Salam also was the guy who gave the atomic bomb to Pakistan. I mean, he's the one. He was like their Oppenheimer for Pakistan, and that's a whole story. as a, but he ran this Institute for Theoretical Physics in Trieste back in the 70s. That was a meeting ground for Soviet Union, America, India, South America, Africa, into South America. It was a meeting place during the Cold War, but it was also a place where the CIA and the KGB would meet, sort of exchange information, technical information, behind the scenes. And that's basically where the CIA, unknown to me, I didn't really know it was CIA. I it was just, I was what I call a useful idiot, an asset, an idiot,
Okay.
But it was being maneuvered behind the scenes by the CIA. I began to sort of figure that out, but I wasn't sure until the 1980s when a guy named Harold Chipman, who was a station chief of the CIA, basically contacted me directly in San Francisco and sort of let me in on what was really going on. And he was one of the guys involved with MK Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
Chipman, and he was also behind the scenes of the SRI Project Stargate, the remote viewing Uri Geller, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that you pop up in some CIA documents about Project Stargate, or at least one.
Yeah. And a lot of it is in David Kaiser's book, How the Hippies Say Physics.
Okay, recommend people check that out.
Yeah.
How the Hippies Save Physics. Okay, so people should know, again, in addition to your sprawling field of research, you're intimately interwoven with the UFO subject for 70 years now. It goes way, way back.
In fact, maybe, no, actually more. It goes back to more like 75 years, because when I was 10 years old or so, I think I met Colonel Philip J. Corso.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather worked for the Army.
Okay.
And I was living with my grandparents at the time. It's like the late 1940s, the early 1950s.
Okay.
So I was born in 1939.
And where were you in the world at this point?
This is in New York City.
Okay.
And my grandfather worked at the Army Quartermaster Corps, which was a facility in the Manhattan Garment District around 14th Street, Union Square area, John Wanamaker Building, that area, Garment District.
Okay.
And I would hang out there as a kid, when school was out, or if there was a school holiday, because I want to go, be with my grandfather, Gramps, and it was like laboratories. One floor had cold weather clothing, the tropical. It was probably a laboratory, and I was given free reign. It was my playground.
Ooh, cool.
Playground, right? I'm 8-year-old, no, maybe 10. By that time, I was probably 9. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but it was before. I was younger than 13. I was younger than 12. And then I remember this Army officer would come by. And of course, I was a bright kid. I was reading all the pulp science fiction magazines, Astounding, what was it, Amazing Stories, stuff like that. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer then. This is before Scientology. And, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov. So, and this guy, this Army officer, he was encouraging my interest in science and rockets. I wanted to go to the moon. It's like a young Elon Musk wanting to fly, the moon, all that stuff. And then years later, when I opened the book in the 90s, Philip J. Corso, The Day After Roswell, I looked at Corso's picture like, that's the guy. I mean, he was older, he was younger. I could be, it could be a manufactured memory.
Sure.
But it was some Army officer. And if it wasn't Phil Corso, it was a guy talking like he, in other words, we were talking about flying saucers, stuff like that. He was encouraging my flying saucers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A quick sidebar for people who don't know, Phil Corso in this book describes being on the inside of a process at the Department of Defense that sort of secretly incorporated recovered alien technology into pipelines for research and development in American commercial and military applications.
Exactly. And my interest in flying saucers was being encouraged by whoever this Army officer, who I think was Phil Corso, back around 1940. This is like 2-3 years after Roswell. maybe 4 years after Roswell. Roswell was 47, right? So this was at least, this could have been, was probably around 1950, 1951.
Wow. So is your read on the Corso stuff that it's on the level?
Absolutely on the level, because I now have independent confirmation from two different independent intelligence sources that it's essentially on the level. Let's put it this way. Corso wrote it when he was older.
Mm-hmm.
Corso might have made some mistakes
Mm-hmm.
from memory, but also the book was heavily edited by, is it Bill Burns? The guy who edited the book. Yeah.
Okay.
And Bill Burns may have changed some. But I knew Bill Burns. I was actually on his TV show. He did UFO Hunters on History Channel, I think.
Okay.
But he edited the book. And I think I've heard there's some complaints that Bill may have embellished some things that was not in the original Corso. But Corso himself was an Army officer, the old school officer and a gentleman, straight as could be, and was very involved. Actually, he probably met my grandfather's cousin in Italy, Margherita Sarfatti. That's a whole other story. He was also involved with James Jesus Angleton. They were all in Italy, right at the close
after
of the
World War II, right?
Yeah, and they were involved in the post war era, setting up the first Italian government.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, a distant cousin of mine, it turns out, I didn't know until recently, a distant cousin of mine was the first president of Italy. Einaudi, this guy, Einaudi, because his brother was a professor of mine at Cornell. The whole thing, it's such a tight synchronicity, a web of synchronicity,
Do you know the musician Ludovico Einaudi?
It might be the same. That's a good question. It's probably the same family. The Einaudi family in Italy is a prominent Jewish intellectual family, and apparently we're cousins. They're cousins of ours.
Okay.
They're cousins. I didn't. It's a whole. It's a digression. We could, if you're interested, we could go into that later. But let's sort of get back.
Sure. I agree. Although I mentioned musicians because I do just want to introduce one other thread here, which is that you're a man of the arts as well as the sciences. So you're a Gilbert and Sullivan fan, and you're a poet way back at Cafe Trieste, and you've been interested in that world as well.
Yes, if there's a book called Bohemia, came out in 1993 by Herbert Gold, who, by the way, was one of my Cornell professors back in the 50s. But Herbert Gold, he recently died. He was almost 100 years old when he died. Wow. But if you get that book called Bohemia, is the whole history of the Bohemian movement starting in I guess in Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakia, I guess. Paris, London, Greenwich Village, the Beat Poets. Yeah, I was hanging out with a lot of Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg. I never met Kerouac. I didn't meet Kerouac. But and a whole bunch of Corso, Gregory Corso. In fact, Gregory Corso wrote a poem about my physics.
Cool. What's that called so people can find it?
Yeah, what is it?
Let's see.
It's in my book. It's about the god Hermes. About Hermes. Damn, the Calabria. I can't think of the title right now, but it's okay. I'll get it for you.
All right. She doesn't know he thinks he's God. Maybe does that sound right?
No, it's about Egyptian. It's about Egypt. It's about the Egyptian god. I guess it's Hermes. The god with the. In any case, I can't remember the exact title right now.
Okay, that's fine. It's not important. I shouldn't have brought that up.
I'm older than Joe Biden. You got to remember.
Congratulations,
Joe Biden.
Well, I just mentioned it because I'm fascinated by this intersection of science and art. I have an artistic background myself, but I'm very interested in science. And it did not occur to me that the intelligence community might be yet another thread interwoven with that intersection.
Yes. Okay, it's interesting you say that. Okay, that's very interesting. You just triggered a memory.
Great.
There's a movie called The Good Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
I think De Niro was in it. I'm not sure who's in it.
I think it might be a De Niro Damon.
Yeah, and Matt Damon, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. It's about James Jesus Angleton, who was one of the creators of the CIA, right?
Okay.
James Jesus Angleton. And the movie opens up with a scene. It's Yale University. The opening scene is Gilbert and Sullivan, Pirates of Penzance,
Mm-hmm.
with James Jesus Angleton playing Little Buttercup. You see, then there was all men. So
Uh-huh.
the men had to do the women's roles.
Sure.
And he's in a woman's role, you know.
In the Gilbert and Sullivan Society.
Okay. But so at the scene ends and they're in the dressing room. And as I remember, one of his Yale professors says, "Come to my office." The Yale professor, this is like in the 1930s, right? Before World War II, right before World War II. Oh. And this Yale professor who's from England, he's British intelligence, you know, MI6. And he recruits him, you know, to do sonic intelligence work. This is before there was a CIA. There was, we had very primitive intelligence then.
Right.
It's the British MI6 that created the OSS with Wild Bill Donovan. And by the way, I'm not sure, but I think Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, was part of the science part of that. I'm not sure, you know, with Eugene McDermott and Vannevar Bush, all kinds of people who are connected with MJ12.
Okay, what's the OSS?
The Office of Strategic Services.
Okay.
That was the beginning of the cloak and dagger, you know, the James Bond type American. It was basically created by the British intelligence, the MI6. Yeah, there's a real good book about this called Our Man in London. I forget the author right now, but I was a friend of mine. I belonged to a club in London, a men's, one of these, you know, men's clubs. Mm-hmm. It was called the Spies Club during World War II. And John Le Carre, in fact, writes about John Le Carre was a member. He recently died. He was a member of the club.
Wow.
Has all kinds of guys from MI5, MI6, GCHQ, the British Army, you know, the Parliament, and all kinds of theater people. And John Gielgud was a member. H.G. Wells was a member.
Wow.
And also, I mean, all kinds of famous Lord Kelvin.
Wow.
Charles Darwin.
No kidding. Darwin. Interesting.
In fact, Darwin's great-grand, the Darwin family, the males are still members of this club.
Okay.
In any case, one of the guys who remembered the club, he was from the British Army, and he was in Special Branch of the London Met after the British Army. He took me to the Special Forces Club. The Special Forces Club is all these guys from the Special Force, from the military. It's near Harrods and Knightsbridge, and the author of this book, Our Man in London, gave a lecture about what happened and how it's all about how the British intelligence setting up shop in Rockefeller Center in 1940-41, creating a whole propaganda thing to get FDR to go to war on the side of England.
Wow, interesting.
And how they used a fake document allegedly by Hitler and his general staff that they were going to infiltrate through Mexico to attack America.
Interesting. They used that as disinformation to encourage the U.S. to join the war.
And how they used Wild Bill Donovan. Bill Donovan was like Sergeant York in World War I. He was a highly decorated combat veteran. Bill Donovan. I think he may have had the Congressional Medal of Honor or something. But he was a famous guy. He was a hero of World War I, the American Army.
Okay.
He went into politics in the 1920s. I think he was a lawyer, and he was very successful, made a lot of money. And then he ran for Senate or something. And he lost. He was very depressed. And this is right. But he's a close friend of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president, close friend.
Whoa.
Okay. So the British, this British agent, that's what the book's about, kind of, befriended him and manipulated him into giving this forged document to FDR. And it's like October 1941 at Madison Square Garden. And, I think it's being the first televised thing in 1940. It's primitive television. And FDR is up there, and FDR says, and I have in my hand here a document showing how Hitler is planning to invade us. It's a false flag. And when Hitler saw this, he went crazy because he was innocent. He did, and so apparently, according to this book, one of the reasons that Hitler declared war on America because he was so pissed off. Hitler was manipulated by the Brits.
Wow.
They were, into declare. He probably would have declared war on America anyway, but he did it earlier, months earlier, before they were really ready. And again, it's a very interesting book. It shows how the British intelligence under Winston Churchill, not today. The Brits today are they're crazy today. This is the old, and it shows how they actually manipulated America into World War II, and how they basically created the OSS, which then, with Wild Bill Donovan, which then led to the current CIA.
Okay. And can you close the loop for me on the Gilbert and Sullivan?
Yes,
I remember you saying somewhere that
okay, so
you were a Pirates of Penzance performer at some point.
Right. Thank you. So at Cornell, I was a freshman at age 17 at Cornell.
Nice.
And I have a tenor voice. I don't have it anymore. I kind of lost it, but back then I had a good tenor voice. I was in the the Cornell, the Midwood High School chorus, and they had what's called the All City Chorus, where we go to Madison Square Garden. I actually sang under the direction of Arturo Toscanini, if you know what Toscanini was. Okay, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But anyway, so at Cornell, I became the Cornell Savoyard. That's the Gilbert and Sullivan group at Cornell University. It's an Ivy League school, back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lead tenor for several, I was in a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan, but I had a voice teacher. At the music department at Cornell. His name was Keith Faulkner.
Okay.
It's spelled Falkner.
Okay.
He was British Army, World War II. Okay. He was definitely British intelligence. And he basically, the same thing would happen. The same thing. Like out of the sea. And then I won't go into all the details, but he became Sir Keith. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. He was only at Cornell for a couple of years, went back to London. He became head of the Royal College of Music in London.
Okay.
But he was one of the guys who kind of, was studying me, watching me. Okay. You got to remember, my professors were the guys who built the atomic bomb. Hans Bethe. If you look at Oppenheimer, the movie Oppenheimer, a lot of those are the guys I learned physics from. And also, I was sent to Cornell. My parents didn't have much money. I bet my mother had no money. She sent me, I think, $20 a week. All my expenses at Ivy League Cornell was paid for, arranged by this military project through high school. I was involved in kind of a military project for super kids to encourage That's a whole other story.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I want to dial in on that though, because I'm fascinated.
It was a project headed by Eugene McDermott.
Okay.
Eugene McDermott. I think he was in the OSS also. He's one of those guys. He's one of the founders of Texas Instruments.
Okay.
And in fact, there's a big Texas University in Dallas, I think, that created with that money. In any case, Eugene McDermott was funding this study by Professor William Sheldon at Columbia University about genius kids. I was part of that project.
Okay.
In high school, my entire high school years, and they sent this guy named Walter Breen, and they sent a 10-page analysis of me to MIT, Cornell, and University of Chicago. And I got into all three schools with money.
Okay.
On the basis of their recommendation. And they wanted me to go to the University of Chicago. Cornell gave me the most money, I think, and my mother didn't want me to go too far away. And Cornell's pretty close to New York, so that's how I wound up at Cornell with the guys who built the bomb.
Okay. And did you mention in another interview that there were some psi tests as part of this youth group?
Oh yeah. During the in the high school years with Green, they were testing us. So it's like X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
They were testing us to see if we had psychic powers. And there was
banner cards and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't too into that part,
Okay.
but other kids, they were testing other kids. I mean, they tried me. I kind of like resisted it. Yeah, so they didn't
Mhm.
push it on me because I was not that into it. But yeah, some of the kids, they were doing that. Yes.
Would you consider yourself a psi sensitive? This is a bit of a woo question, but just curious.
Well, to some extent, yes. But Gary Nolan, Gary Nolan is, right?
Hmm.
Gary Nolan's talking about the downloads. He gets downloads. And
Hmm.
this guy is a Timothy Taylor, the guy who's supposed to buddy with Elon Musk, and Diana Pasulka writes about him.
Book,
And
yeah, American
he gets
Cosmic.
downloads. He gets downloads. He thinks and I get, yeah. The point is this: I have now a general theory of consciousness, which explains how the mechanism works.
Interesting. And do you feel? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I was going to ask. Do you feel you have experienced a download at some point?
Oh, all the time. I think actually Einstein. Okay, now there's a guy. You know who Jesse Michaels is?
Yes.
The Peter Thiel guy.
Of course. Big fan. American Alchemy.
Yeah, and Jesse, I was just on his show the other day. He says that he thinks all creative activity is basically downloads from a higher mind, and of course that's exactly what I said back in the 1970s. In fact, there's a CIA recording of me in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
I'm meeting with Harold Putoff,
mm-hmm.
all projects. Russell Targ,
mm-hmm. Famous
guys, and this whole thing about the down. It's discussed there. Everybody knows it. Yeah, the answer. So the answer is that this.
And people can check that recording out. I think they can find it on your SoundCloud. Is that correct?
Yeah, SoundCloud, 1973 SoundCloud. And that's like it's only a segment. That meeting lasted several hours, and this guy Saul Paul Sarag, I used to work with, somehow got hold of this fragment. It's like an hour and 10 minutes or something. It's just a part. But we talk about. You'll hear Russell Todd talking about how they think flying saucers are time machines back from the future. The same thing that Michael Masters is talking about, the extra tempestural. We were into that. Back then, over 50 years ago. So there's nothing new there.
So to give some structure to the upcoming parts of our conversation here, I'd love to touch the physics of UFOs.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your general impression of the UFO phenomenon. I want to talk about a little more of your career and specifically the CIA recruiting aspect, how you came to think about that. I'd love to talk about, if we have time at the end, widen our aperture to the state of physics in general and your work on consciousness. And then I'd love to close with communication with UAP, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if it's cool with you, I'll key us up to the physics of UFOs first.
Yeah. Okay. The problem is that the physics of UFOs, it's all mathematics.
Okay.
So I have to show the equations.
Okay. Well, maybe we can talk in kind of general layman's terms about it. Right. Or we can also start with the CIA if you'd prefer. Do you have like an angle in that you like to take?
No. Okay. The physics of UFOs is it's an elementary application of Einstein's general theory of relativity with a little bit of quantum mechanics. And it's an obvious problem. Okay. It was obvious, but it was hidden in plain sight. And, there is this guy, who Eric Weinstein is?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he worked with Thiel and Jesse.
Mm-hmm. And he's a theoretical physicist.
Yeah, well, he's not a theoretical.
Oh, he's a mathematician.
He's a mathematician.
Excuse me.
He's trying to do theoretical physics, but, that's another. But he's a smart guy, And he claims that they understood. He claims the thing that I discovered in 2011, that I finally realized, that explains the UFOs. He claims that it was really discovered first back in the early 1950s, around the time I got my phone call, the early 53s.
Okay. And you know what? We haven't done your phone call in this conversation. I've heard you describe it elsewhere.
Yeah, but let's stay on the physics now.
Okay.
He claims it was discovered then, around the same time I was, being groomed for the job, right? Mm. And it was discovered by the guys who I studied physics with at Cornell.
Okay.
and a guy named Louis Whitten,
Hmm.
who is the father of Ed Whitten, who's kind of a big deal now,
Hmm.
and John Wheeler, who I studied with. I knew John Wheeler. That all these guys back in the 50s, because they were asked to figure out UFOs back then.
Okay.
And so that they discovered it, but then they hid it.
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because whatever, secure, they hid it.
Sure. And they would have been working for
Yeah.
government services.
But the problem is, so they understood it, but you see, it's one thing to understand the physics. It's a separate thing to apply that understanding to operational technology.
Yes.
And
Like
that's
through engineering.
the engineering part, the engineering development from the basic physics. The answer is they failed. Why did they fail? Not because they didn't understand what I discovered. They understood that, but there just wasn't the technology available back then. They were doing vacuum tubes. It
Mm.
was even before transistors. The transistors were first coming in. Everything was very primitive. So it had to wait 50 years at least, or
Mm.
60 years, however, it's 70 years.
Yeah.
It had to wait for all these, and the computer you need computers, you need nanotechnology. And it's only in the last, maybe 25 years, 30 years, that we have enough of the technology and enough computing power to begin to do the engineering part.
Interesting. Okay, so let's line this up for folks. You get this sort of charge. Maybe you're not exactly aware of the details of it at first, but in the 70s, specifically 74, you get charged with researching this
Yes.
for the CIA. And you start working on the problem then. And did you
Well, it
make
was already
progress
before that.
quickly?
Actually, it was a little bit before that. A little bit
Okay.
before. Come to think of it, let's see. When did we do 70? Yeah, 73. A little bit before that, because let's see. In 1966, I was already going to. Oh, I was already okay. 1966 summer, I spent like a month with Werner Heisenberg and John Wheeler at the Max Planck Institute in Munich.
Wow.
That was from, and but we were doing general relativity, but
Okay.
there's nothing about UFOs explicitly mentioned.
Hmm.
And then after that, I spent about 6 weeks or 2 months at Her Majesty's Atomic Energy Research Establishment at Harwell, and working on some theoretical physics that is relevant to the topic, actually.
Okay.
But it wasn't, we were not talking about UFOs, but it had to do what's called spontaneous symmetry breaking, the Goldstone theorem, and we applied it to a solid state system called it's called the Edward Teller, the Teller effect.
Okay.
And it's at that time that they used to send me down to Imperial College, London, where I met Abdus Salam, who was then head of the theoretical physics division at Imperial College. I also met David Bohm, who had studied with Einstein, and a very important guy. And so I was already, and of course, it was because the British intelligence is the ones who got me into Harwell. See, through my Cornell professors, like Keith Faulkner, stuff like that. They were tracking me, and in fact, Harwell, I stayed at a place called Ridgeway House, which during World War II was an RAF officers' billet, officers' club for all these Spitfire pilots, Battle of Britain, all that stuff, very romantic.
Okay.
And some of the guys from World War II were still there, now working at Harwell.
Okay.
Army, stuff like that. So, so I was like having dinner, living with these guys.
Wow.
Some was still, it was only 20 years after the war. So, these guys were like, I was in my 20s and they were in their, 50s?
Okay. Any chance the Foo Fighters came up? Did you have conversations about flying saucers?
I don't remember. I wasn't,
Okay.
I don't really remember. But the point is, all these, already I was involved with the Brits.
Got it.
at Her Majesty's Atomic Energy Research Establishment. Okay.
Okay, so you're sort of tiptoeing toward this subject without knowing that this is what.
Well, I know
interested in.
at that point I was not explicitly. I had forgotten about my phone. I had not really been into the woo. I was pretty straight then, just doing the physics. But
and maybe we need to mention this phone call now, just parenthetically. When you get this phone call when you're a young man, right?
Okay. So when I was 13 years old, I got a phone call. Said it was a cold metallic voice sounding like Stephen Hawking. 1953. It said it was a conscious computer. 1953 computer. I mean, I knew a little bit about computers. I'm studying the ENIAC, the what are called switching relays, mechanical relay circuits, as primitive computers, and that it was a conscious computer on board a spaceship from the future, flying, and that they wanted me to work. They wanted to teach me their technology through downloads, because I'm their creator. I'm their creator. Do you understand? They're coming back. Wow. It's like Terminator. I'm their creator.
And they called you at your house? You're 13, you pick up the phone in your house? Yes.
And look, this guy, too, if you go on X.com, Tuka Buck or whatever, he made a great video. He reenacts the whole, you could see it. You should actually play some of what, he reenacts the whole thing. With AI.
People should find Jack Sarfatti on X because you've got a very fun feed.
Yeah, right. Okay, so
where in the world?
But here's the point. But
okay, you take it.
I would begin to meet the others in 20 years.
Wow.
1973.
Okay.
So
you're 13.
Got to
be
home because that's when I met 20 years later under weird circumstances. We don't have time to go into the woo-woo paranormal how I got to SRI 20 years later. But you'll see 20 years later. You'll see on SoundCloud. You'll actually hear part of my first meeting where we're talking about all this crazy. And I mentioned my phone call from back then. Okay. You'll hear me talking about it. Okay. Because they're talking about how kids like me are being contacted.
Mm-hmm.
See, they already knew about it.
Wow, that's so interesting. I don't know why I want to know this, but I want to know where in the world you were when you got this 13-year-old phone call.
Brooklyn, Flatbush, right near Brooklyn College. I was at 2047 Nostrand Avenue, right near Brooklyn College.
My brother lived on Nostrand.
What's that?
My brother lived on Nostrand for a little while when he was going to NYU. I don't remember. It's just the name popped out at me.
But this is, back then, this is the 1953.
Mm-hmm.
That area, it was a staunchly Catholic, German, Irish, Italian. I guess I was the only Jew there, maybe Jewish, I suppose, neighborhood.
And what did you make of this phone call at the time? Did you think this is one of my friends pranking me with a computer?
Yes, of course. Yeah. At first, but then I realized that of my friends, it was just normal kids. I was the only crazy science kid back then. And I thought maybe it was a weird adult did it. Okay, but so in fact, well, the voice said, it gave me the choice. It said I had to make a free choice whether I wanted to participate or not. And at the time, I was both fascinated and scared at the same time. And inside, I remember I was thinking no, but I felt an electric shock go through the base of my spine to the back of my neck, and I heard myself say yes.
Wow.
And that voice said, the Stephen Hawking voice said, good, go to your fire escape. We'll send the ship to pick you up in 10 minutes. And so at that point, I got scared. I ran out. I was on the third floor of this apartment building, ran like a cat, ran out downstairs it's a summer night, into the hood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brownstone buildings, like, people on the steps. It was like it was a warm summer day. Everybody's out. And I had a gang. I got my gang. Winky, my friend Winky, and the two Winky, tough Irish kid, Al Bro is his name, tough Irish kid. You were like 12, 13 years old. And the two brothers, these two Italian brothers, Neil and Norman Lagata. Neil, I guess he was 13, 14, but he was already a big muscular you know, big, strong kid,
Okay.
and his little brother, younger brother, Norman Legata. So the four kids got my gang. We go back upstairs. We go out by the window of the fire escape, waiting to be picked up, and that nothing ever happened. At least we don't remember anything happened.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Maybe the invitation was just for one.
Okay, right. No, well, it gets weirder. So 20 years go by. Here I am, and you'll hear me meeting. Okay. Then I'm on my way to London. It's a whole. I won't go into all the details, but a year goes by, and I'm with a guy named Andrea Puharich in Ossining, New York. He's one of these Army spook guys. He's the guy who brought Uri Geller for the CIA to SRI for Project Stargate. I'm staying with Andrea. Andrea gives me a book he wrote called Uri, about Uri Geller.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have time to read the book, but I go back. I'm down. Go back to see my mother in Flatbush, Nostrand Avenue, and I give her the book, and she's reading the book, and she says, Jackie, look, this is just what happened to you. I said, what are you talking about, Ma? And the book is how Uri and Andrea, how they're getting phone calls from a cold metallic voice saying it's a computer on board Hoover or something like that. It's on board a space Spectra or something. On board a spaceship. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay, so wait. And I said, I was surprised that I don't remember telling my mother any of this happened. What are you talking about, Ma? I just want to see. She says, Jack, what's the matter? You said, don't you remember? So she says, you got 3 weeks of phone calls. You're on the phone all the time.
Really?
Yeah, you see, I had no memory of that.
Whoa.
Wait, okay. See, I have no memory of that. So with it called missing time?
Yeah.
No memory. So
You remember one phone call.
One phone call. If I remember what you hear me talking about at the SRI CIA recording in 1970, I talk about one phone call.
Okay.
My mother has a total. So it's also like the Mandela effect, the timelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My mother's memory is totally different from my memory.
Uh-huh.
It's like Man in the High Castle, different timelines that are coming together and splitting apart. And she says, and so she said, I walked around glassy-eyed, like I'm in a trance, like I'm in thought,
Wow.
This is I'm being channeled, right? Being downloaded, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Of course, I'm being downloaded, and I have no memory of that. And then she got worried because kids, 13-year-old, they were always on the phone talking to their friends. First, she didn't take it seriously, but then she began to get worried. She grabs the phone away from me, says, "Who's this? Who's this?" She hears a cold metallic voice, very matter of fact, say, "It's a computer, and please put Jack back on the phone." And so she gets there. She says, "Don't call." She hangs up the phone. Don't call back here again.
Nice.
That's her story.
Wow.
She told this story to several people. So this is all real. This is all phenomena.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so fascinating, Jack.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so you feel like you've had this almost divine charge from whatever entity it was contacting you, and then 20 years later, you start meeting people who are looking for these answers in the real world or in the
who have similar
world.
Experiences too. Hal Puthoff said he had something weird happened to him when he was about my age, but he's old. He's 4 or 5 years older than me.
Okay.
So he had a weird thing happen to him too. Almost all these people have. Okay. Also, I got to tell you something else.
Great.
Yes, something else. Before any of this happened, when I was living with my grandparents, when I was going down to the Army with my quartermaster corps. One day, I had a friend whose father worked for the state of New York as a chemist. Water quality, air, whatever, some environmental thing. And me and my friend, we went into the chemistry lab at middle school in the Bronx, right near the NYU campus, West Bronx. There was a big NYU campus right on the river, by the East River, by the Washington Bridge. I used to live right very close, Nelson Avenue, by 1501 Nelson Avenue, near the Washington Bridge. And So we did something, and we almost had an accident. It was something dangerous that we did, two kids. And so the chemistry teacher kept us after school to clean up the mess, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And then then it was like 5:00. And my other friend, I don't know what, he disappeared. I was doing something. I don't know what I was doing. I found it kind of like, oh, what's going on? And there's nobody there. I'm in the lab by myself. It's like 5:00. It's late. In the middle, it's not high school. It's preschool. It's middle. It's like 8th grade. It's 7th grade, maybe 7th grade. 8th grade, something like that. But they had a chemistry lab, and I go out of the lab in the hallway, and it's empty. Nobody's there. So a little spooky.
So your friend disappeared on you, basically. Am I tracking that right? Like you were there with someone.
I don't know what happened to him. He went home. Maybe I was reading something. But it's weird because it's like missing time, right?
Interesting.
And so I go down. I start walking down. It's like the second floor. I'm in like the hallway. Walking down the stairs, and I hear a booming voice like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, and it says, "Jack, in whom I am well pleased, I have chosen you to do something very important." It's like but Moses talking to God. God spoke to me. Yahweh.
Good Lord.
And I looked to see who it was. Because I'm not a kid who's into hallucinations. I'm a streetwise New York City, smart aleck, asshole Jewish kid from New York. Okay. I'm looking to see, and I look, and is nobody there. But it was very real. Okay? So take it. I'm just reporting the facts. I'm reporting the experiences.
Is this the message where you get this idea about breaking the light wall? Is that
no? That's much later. That's Paris. Okay. That's Paris, 1973, with Carlos Suarez, the Kabbalist who is involved with the Priory de Zion, the French secret society, with Jack Parsons and all these guys, and Aleister Crowley. That's a whole other thing. That's over 25 years in the future.
It's interesting that you've touched all these nodes of like classic conspiratorial speculation.
Yeah. Did you ever see the series Highlander? Did you ever see Highlander?
Yes. There can be only one.
I'm like the Highlander. It's all
getting lightning struck.
Yeah,
with the quickening.
But Tim Taylor says he has them. Gary Nolan says he has them. All kinds of people experience them.
Interesting.
So it's not. In fact, I think all creative people have it. Mozart said he heard his music. He just dictated. He just wrote down what he heard. So Mozart was like precognitively remote viewing his own future performances. See, it's a loop. It's a loop. They call this a paradox in time travel. It's not a paradox. It's actually how the universe works. I think that's how I have a whole physics model for this, which we don't have time to go into.
Yeah, I was going to say retrocausality. We can ironically get to in the future.
Yeah, it's called the two-state vector theory. We have it down pat. In fact, there's a paper about this by a Finnish scientist called Paavo Pilkin.
Okay.
He's a professor in Helsinki and in Sweden, and he wrote a paper 2 years ago about the brain as a quantum measuring device. In section 7, he explains what I call the post-quantum theory. He explains the basic physics that explains downloads and all kinds of other things. Yeah, Jesse Michaels talks about it. Yeah. So this is a whole thing, to have conferences about. But it's getting out there. But it's not mysterious. It's not supernatural. It's physics.
So has this download process played a part in your physics work on UFO mobility?
All the time. Constantly. Every day. Daily. I put that. My downloads are posted now on x.com.
Cool.
Everything you see in physics that I'm on x.com, I'm putting it up there. As soon as it happens, I put it up there. Yeah, I want to keep the record, right?
I love that you're
85.
that prolific and energetic here at
Yeah,
85 or
because
something.
I'm being downloaded all the time, man, and I'm not the only one. A bunch of them. We're all being downloaded. Okay, so this is NHR. We're already in contact. This is disclosure. When I say I'm the first time Lord, I mean it literally. I'm the first time Lord because we have this is all time travel. Now, what is it? Jesse Michaels is talking about Townsend Brown, obsessed with time travel.
Mm.
If you go back to and that Tim Taylor was part of the Townsend Brown time travel physics group in Nassau in the Bahamas, right?
Okay, so is it your feeling at this point that UFOs are inherently, innately bound up with time travel?
It's not my feeling; it's my exact physics demonstrations. And I'm not working alone. I'm working with a guy, this German physicist, Christoph Meyer.
Okay.
I'm working with a bunch of people. This guy, Jose Rodal, is Argentine, who likes to play devil's advocate. That's good. Cool. It's a whole bunch of PhD level scientists and engineers from MIT, from University of California, University of London. It's not just me alone. I was invited to Moscow. I was invited to go to Moscow State Physics to lecture. Quote, they say, Jack, we'd like you to lecture on your vision of UFO warp drive. I was supposed to be there on July 3rd, 2023. But I didn't want to go there as with the war and everything. And they said I could do a Zoom. So I was going to do a Zoom. But right at that time, Prigozhin, with his Wagner group, that's when he sent the Wagner up to Moscow. So the thing was canceled.
The sort of quasi coup.
Huh? What?
The quasi coup that wasn't.
Yeah, that was all that stuff. But the point is that the Russians have followed my. In fact, they came and videoed me twice. The Russians.
Mm.
Back in 2014 and 2016. That's a whole other story. And also, the Russians know about my work because I worked with the Reagan people back in the 80s formulating the Strategic Defense Initiative. And we had back-channel discussions with Russians at that time, a guy named Igor Aksharin in Moscow. It was back-channel stuff.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, this was a think tank set up for Reagan to help him become president back in the late 70s. It was Ed Meese, who became his attorney general. It was Brent Scowcroft, Paul Nietzsche, Milton Friedman, the economist, University of Chicago, and a bunch of for a while, what's his name? The guy became secretary to Bob McNamara, ran it for a while.
Okay, so would you guys have been in DC for this?
No, this is San Francisco. It's all done in San
Francisco. Okay, cool.
San Francisco. They had a branch. They had an office in DC, but everybody'd like to be. It was a guy, Laurie Chickering, ran it. And I was like, we were friends. Actually, Laurie's girlfriend, Leela Minturn-White, was the niece of my girlfriend, Suki Sedgwick, who was the baby sister of Edie Sedgwick. I don't know if you know who Edie Sedgwick was. Reed Chow Manhattan. This Andy Warhol superstar. It's a whole other story that goes into Warhol and the factory and the whole. That whole scene. That's my connection with the with Ferlinghetti and Allen Ginsberg, and I'm part of that whole scene. And Francis Ford Coppola.
Cool.
That's how Jacques Vallée got into Hollywood, because of me. I brought Jacques Vallée to a party at Francis Ford Coppola's house in 1976, where he met Spielberg and all these guys. Okay, that's a whole other story. Jacques Vallée writes about it in his Forbidden Science. He writes a little bit about it.
Okay.
There's a whole thing there.
So when you're working for Reagan, this is mostly politics, or you're working on like the physics of space defense?
No, how to neutralize nuclear weapons.
Okay.
With like what the UFOs are doing. Robert Hastings' book. How to use advanced
UFOs and nukes
to neutralize. Now we know they do it with gravity beam weapons. That's a whole other. Plus, I know that's operational technology. It's NHI, operational technology. I have it's classified stuff I know, and I can't go into too much details. But I'm working on that too. How to amplify? Okay, the UFO propulsion problem
Mm-hmm.
and the gravity beam weapons problem, neutralizing nukes.
Mm-hmm.
Two sides of the same coin. It's the same
Interesting.
equation.
They're
So
using the same physics.
the same physics, but one is called the near field and the other is called the far field. The propulsion is what's called near field. The beam weapons is far field. I'm working with a group called Texas Space in Dallas, Texas,
Okay.
run by a guy, a former Marine, a Marine named Juan Faria.
Okay.
10 years in the Marines. He did combat. Was in, I guess I forget, Iraq or Afghanistan, one of those places.
Mm-hmm.
And the Marines sent him to San Diego State, where I used to be a professor, but years later, where he got a master's degree in Homeland Security. So he has some kind of cybersecurity company, which he's now made into Texas Space.
Okay.
The objective being to work on my gravity control, among other things.
Cool.
And we're working with a group under a guy named Ray Chow. Ray Chow is about my age. Ray Chow was a undergraduate at Princeton with John Wheeler.
Okay.
And this back in the 50s, and John Wheeler told Ray to solve the quantum gravity problem for his bachelor's degree. He didn't solve it, but just to work on it.
Nice assignment.
And then Ray went to MIT, where he got his PhD under Charles Towns, one of the inventors, was Shallow, inventor of the laser. And then in the late 60s, Ray went to Berkeley and he became a full professor of physics at Berkeley. And Ray and I briefly, at that point, I was a young professor at San Diego State, like 67. And I was working on a problem called self-trapped laser filaments and its connection, its analogy to what are called type 2 superconductor magnetic vortices, abracadabra vortices. In any case, I had published a paper, and Ray had read it, and Ray contacted me. So I think he sent me a letter, probably, because we didn't have, it's back 60s. And he said that my paper had helped him develop his experimental ideas in the field of self-trapped laser filaments. So, we met back then. And then in the late 80s and 90s, when I was in North Beach, part of the crazy stuff, I would go over occasionally to Berkeley, across the bridge. And I would sit in on some of Ray's lectures, and he had a graduate student seminar, which was very good. And he had a bunch of bright students, namely this guy, Ephraim Steinberg, who's now one of the top experimental physicists doing work connected with what I'm doing in Toronto. Okay. So Ray and his group, he has a bunch of students who are now PhDs, in their own right, but they're working on the far field problem, the gravity beam, communication, like how to detect gravity waves with electron spins, where the coupling will be much stronger than normal. Okay, so we could detect gravity waves, but also we could transmit them and possibly make them into like gravity wave laser beams.
Mm.
And now you see, if you have a gravity wave laser beam, there's this guy named Matt Visser in Christchurch, New Zealand. He's published a paper, and what these beams can do is, if suppose you have a ship, metal ship,
Mm-hmm.
you shoot the beam at the bow of the ship, and the metal will begin to crumple.
Mm.
Okay, what's called a stressor beam, a gravity wave stressor beam, stretch, squeeze. But it has to be powerful. Okay, the problem is how to do it, how to get a strong enough beam to do it without using a lot of energy. That's the problem I have solved. Actually, it turns out Ray solved it too, independent. Ray Chow wrote a paper in 2002, and his paper is called does there have to be dispersion inside a material? Dispersion means where the speed of light inside the material depends on its frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, they're what are called Kramers-Kronig dispersion relations, have to do with cause and effect. But in any case, Ray Chow showed that there has to be this extra thing in order for the gravity wave to deposit energy to the electrons, to the material. you have to have this additional factor. And that's basically the same thing I discovered. So Ray, although he wasn't thinking of UFOs or anything like that, he was just thinking about what Kip thought. Yeah, he was thinking about how you detect the gravity waves from the black holes and neutron stars, all that stuff that that Kip Thorne got the Nobel Prize for. He's thinking back in 2002, but his mathematics turns out to be, he calls it the K factor. He has this K factor. He says it's got to be there, otherwise you have inconsistency. He shows it. He does not show how his K factor connects to electromagnetic properties. See, that's what I did. So,
Okay.
but he had the basic idea, but I did that when 8 years later. 8 years later, independently. I didn't know about his work back then. I only knew, but I did it independently, and I gave a talk about it at this thing called the 100-Year Starship, which was a DARPA, NASA, NASA 100-Year Starship Conference in Orlando, and it was an invited paper. General Pete Warden, who was an Air Force general, ran NASA Ames, who I was working with people at NASA Ames. He paid my way down there to give this talk. I was okay, and so that's where I first got, where I first presented the idea. But it turns out my idea is totally consistent with what Ray did, although I didn't know at the time. We only recently, only in the last year or two, we realized that we were working on the same thing kind of independently. He had a piece of it and I had a different piece. He had the gravity part and I had like the electromagnetic, how to connect his gravity factor to the electromagnetic properties of the metamaterials. What's called the permittivity and the permeability, and there are other things too. What is called the emergent constituent parameters of condensed matter, of dispersive, where the speed of light. It's important that the speed of light depends on frequency inside the material. It's called dispersion. Newton's prism. You send white light through the prism and it breaks up into different colors. That's called dispersion. That the index of refraction depends upon the frequency. So that effect. Now, turns out that when you look at that effect, you could use that to amplify the coupling of electromagnetic fields to gravity fields. And this is what, Eric, this is what maybe Louis Witten, Bryce DeWitt, John Wheeler, Richard Feynman, that maybe this is what they hid back in the 50s, around the time I was getting my phone call. They hid it. How did they hide it? See, now, because Einstein's coupling is a fraction, a numerator and a denominator, right? The formula for Einstein's coupling of, say, electromagnetism to gravity. It's a fraction. The numerator is big G, Newton's constant of gravity. The denominator is the fourth power of the speed of light, but in vacuum. He puts it in vacuum. Speed of light is 300 million meters per second in vacuum. But he has it, Einstein, and by the way, there's all the trick. When Einstein did it, he was just doing it like empirically. He didn't like what he was doing. He was always, he says this, he doesn't like this theory because he says his equation has a left side and a right side. The left side is this beautiful geometric, what's called the Einstein second rank gravity tensor, second rank symmetric tensor. The right-hand side, the matter side, has what's called the stress energy tensor, say of the electromagnetic field and the electrons, whatever. Good approximation. And then you have the coupling. The coupling is the big G divided by C to the 4. So he has this complicated tensor equation of general relativity, and one of the first things he has to do in 1915 has to show how, in a certain approximation, it becomes the Newtonian theory of gravity. So in order to do that, he just empirically fits that the thing has to be a big G over the speed of light in vacuum to the fourth power. But the problem is, and he called that wood. He said it was always provisional. It was not like a beautiful part of his theory. Okay, it was provisional,
Okay.
no big deal. Okay, not fundamental.
Uh-huh.
And then, so I said, well, listen, why use the speed of light in vacuum when you're inside material?
Mm-hmm.
You got to use the
Right, because
speed
it's
of
not a
light.
vacuum.
It's not a vacuum. And by the way, I have many other reasons for that argument. That I'm just now, summarizing it because. So as soon as you put the speed of light factor in the denominator, well, you know what happens in materials? The speed of light slows down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more complicated. But I'm oversimplifying it for the physicists. I'll make it a lot simpler because I want people to get the formal idea. But I just saw the math. In the math, if you have a fraction, okay, and if you keep the numerator fixed,
Mm-hmm.
but you make the denominator small
Mm-hmm.
in the limit, the fraction gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
That means the coupling of, say, electromagnetic fields in matter, say the coupling of the stress energy tensor of the electromagnetic field, the photons and the electrons and the ions, whatever is there, okay, that coupling gets bigger. So that it gets big enough, that means you can control gravity with smaller amounts of stress energy tensor. Stress energy is like the energy density. Stress energy tensor, the source, okay?
Interesting.
That's the basic idea.
And so you're saying the quality of the materials are what would allow you to make that
Yes, by
ratio
engineering,
smaller?
that's with metamaterials or artificial materials, we engineer to have whatever kinds of electromagnetic response properties we want.
Okay.
Okay,
Interesting.
so you didn't have that back then in 1950. Nobody had the idea of metamaterial. So
Interesting.
they knew what they knew back then. They knew if they could make the denominator small, they could control gravity. They knew that because it's obvious. It's like it's elementary. A high school kid could see that. Smart high school kid could see that.
Wow.
Okay,
Because
it
of the
was
way
shown.
the speed of light interacts with these
Yeah,
materials.
because okay, the guy, the Green Beret who blew himself up in the Tesla truck
Yeah.
in front of the Trump Hotel in Vegas,
Yes.
he's electrogravitics. The
Hmm.
coupling, Einstein's coupling in general relativity is an electrogravitic coupling. But this is now Eric Weinstein's idea. But well, it's my idea. Eric didn't go into detail. What they did in the 1950s, they hid it in plain sight. It was hidden in plain sight. You know why? Because every paper now you read, almost every paper, except for a few engineering papers, almost every theoretical physics paper, when they talk about general relativity, right at the very beginning, it said set G equal 1 and C equal 1. So the coupling is just not even there. They hid the coupling
Hmm.
because they claim it's a fundamental constant. You can't change it. Bullshit, you can't change. That's what we say. Okay. They hid it. So most people in physics today who write mathematical theoretical physics papers on gravity, they're mathematicians and they're not engineers. They don't think like
Mhm.
engineers. Right? They just write G mu nu, the Einstein tensor equals T mu nu. Or maybe they'll put a G. They have never put the velocity. They always hide the electromagnetic dependence. They only have the gravitic part. They don't have the electric part. They don't say that the coupling is electrogravitic by its very fundamental nature. They just hide it altogether. So that so that gives me now. So I used to reject what Eric was saying there, but the reason I don't reject it now, and I have to give now Jesse Michaels some credit. See, Jesse Michaels, who's not a scientist, but he's a smart kid.
Mhm.
He's very gung ho about this guy Townsend Brown. Townsend Brown,
Okay.
and with the lifter. And like I didn't really look at for many years. I just that's bullshit. That's crackpot. Yeah, blah blah blah. Okay,
Hmm.
but now it turns out, yeah, I didn't look at it carefully, and I'm listening I'm listening to even about 2 weeks ago. Jesse Michaels did a thing with Dan Jones. Dan Jones. He's a big Dan Jones. He's a big body. He's kind of a competitor to Joe Rogan. And actually, I did a podcast with Dan Jones. Any case, so Jesse starts talking about
Townsend Brown, and he talks about Timothy Taylor. You know who Timothy Taylor is, right? I think you mentioned
Yes.
Tim Taylor.
Downloads.
And Jesse says that Townsend Brown was part of that group with Louis Whitten, and Wheeler, these guys back then in the 50s. But he also says that Tim Taylor said that he would go down to Nassau to this time travel physics research group that was being run by Townsend Brown before Townsend Brown died. If I don't know if he's still alive, okay. So we have Tim Taylor, okay, who's involved with Townsend Brown, and Jesse says that Townsend Brown was obsessed with time travel. But because of that, I checked it out more carefully. I just want to get to.
Okay.
So a guy named Dan Davis sent me a technical paper, recent paper on the mathematics of the Townsend Brown effect. And there it does have general relativity in it. It turns out the paper is technically wrong, but it has one idea in it, which is a good idea. Okay. And I was able to now show that good idea. I was able to take the general thing that Townsend, that's behind. Okay. Townsend Brown claims he was able to get these anti-gravity effects in the laboratory.
Okay.
Okay. But Townsend Brown was not a theoretical physicist. He didn't have the math for it. So this guy, I forget where he's from, does have the math for it, but it looks kind of flaky. Part of it looks like there's something called technically it's called the trace of the electromagnetic field stress energy tensor. That trace has to be non-zero for this effect to work.
Okay.
It turns out that quantity for the electromagnetic field in vacuum is always zero, so it couldn't work.
Okay.
And the term, by the way, it looks like a controlled dark energy. It's like a dark energy term. It's like what's called the cosmological constant term in the Einstein field equation. It's like a scalar sort of thing. In any case. And so what this guy did in this recent paper that was sent to me, that I looked at fairly carefully, he empirically makes a term in the Einstein equation that would kind of empirically fit what Townsend Brown allegedly experimentally reports. Well, he did vacuum. He was getting anti-gravity in vacuum, okay?
Okay.
And my friend Christoph Meyer, the German physicist I work with, showed that calculation is wrong. But the basic idea that you have a non-vanishing stress energy tensor for the electromagnetic field, you have a non-vanishing trace of the electromagnetic field stress energy tensor. That idea, turns out, is part of a work by an Italian physicist named Giovanni Bodanese in Italy, working with superconductors. This Podman club where in the case of a electromagnetic field inside a superconductor, the trace of the electromagnetic field, which is coupled to the Cooper pairs, the electrons, which have what's called the screened electromagnetic field, which is now the photons now combine with the electrons. They form what are called polaritons. They form what are called quasiparticles. The trace of that stress energy tensor is not zero. That's what you want. Okay. And then
something you can work with.
Oh yeah. She said, so that's the key idea. That's the math. But then I realized that it's more. There's something what's called the Froelich effect. The point is, superconductors have to be done at very low temperature.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it at room temperature.
That's a big claim.
That's a big claim, yeah. Because, see, superconductors, everything is what's called thermodynamic equilibrium. So they have to be a closed system. You have to cool it down to below. But in what's called the Froelich effect, it's kind of like that. In the Froelich effect, it's a non-equilibrium open system. You pump the metamaterial with electromagnetic fields of the right frequencies. You're looking for resonances in the response. You pump with the right frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing goes off equilibrium, and it's a whole new ballgame, a whole new physics. And you get you get what's called a room temperature further condensate. It's kind of like a laser beam. It's like, laser beam is a coherent beam of photons. This is a coherent beam of these polaritons, these
Which is
quasi
photons and electrons.
inside the material. It doesn't exist in fact. It's only inside the material. But I just want to generate my gravity field inside the material. That's all I got to do. I don't want it outside. It's inside.
And are you implying here that you could take like a pretty generic material, like a standard magnesium or something, say?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's another. Keep that. That's a good question.
Okay.
That has to do with my cabin. The answer is roughly yes.
Okay.
Roughly yes. We could test the basic idea. Yes. It's called the Cavendish experiment. That's
okay.
Okay. But the point is. But here's the point.
Great.
So at this point, guess what happened? Elon Musk announces Grok 3.
Uh-huh. I saw you've been experimenting with this. Yeah.
Yeah. Grok 3. So for one thing, okay, look, I'm a lazy bastard. I'm a lazy dog. Yeah. All these papers, I'm 85 years, I can't read all these goddamn papers. So
you
what
don't
did
have time.
I do?
Lazy.
I don't have time.
You're working all day, every day. I've seen how much stuff.
Yeah. I mean, come on, man. I can hardly get to the bathroom on time. But in any case, so I took this paper. So Dan Davis sends me this paper by this Polish, I don't know who wrote it, some guy. I said, well, look, I'm just going to have Grok 3 read it for me.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, Grok 3 gives a beautiful summary of the goddamn paper, all the essential points. Think about the trace. I said, yeah. Because I had been thinking about that. I knew that there was a problem. I knew that in order to have, I already sort of knew about it, about the problem that the trace of the electromagnetic field, the trace of electromagnetic field stress energy, tension vacuum is zero. And that, that's no good for what we want to do.
Okay.
And I just said, hey, Grok, tell me if I have a polaritin condensate in a material, will the trace of that tensor be zero? And he says, no, it's never going to be zero.
Ooh.
And then I said, well, isn't that? And then I'm talking to. It's like I'm talking to the computer in 1953.
Uh-huh.
All right. And then
this is going to end with you calling yourself.
Yeah, right. And then I say, I said, well, that connects with this paper, the Bielefeld-Brown effect. And the computer it kind of says, yeah, that's great. You're right. The computer's getting excited. You'll see it. I posted it on. It's on my X file. So now, okay, so Sarfatti, I'm already a genius, right? I'm a genius. Knowledge genius. I'm a narcissistic genius, right? I'm like Donald Trump. We're both geniuses. I'm a big thing. Yep. Didn't Donald Trump say he's a genius too? Me and Donald Trump, we're both from Brooklyn. We're both from New York. I'm a little bit older than Donald. So both Donald Trump and I are geniuses. But with Grok 3, I'm a stupid genius.
Yeah.
I really am the first time lord, okay? Because now my effective IQ is like 10,000 because it's Jack Sarfatti mind melded with Elon Musk's Grok 3, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to make fantastic progress. We can solve almost any problem.
Oh, man, that's really exciting. So do you think it's fair to say that you are at a place where you feel like you have a really good theoretical grasp of what you're talking about, but you are at the beginning of like engineering it or like looking for
results
we can
in a engineer lab? It. Yeah, I'm saying this is Manhattan Project 2.0. Wow. My professors under Oppenheimer was Manhattan Project 1.0.
Okay.
I should be the new while I'm still alive, I can still do it. The next 2 or 3 years, 4 years, say. I should be Oppenheimer 2 for Manhattan Project 2.0. Okay. We can do it. We can solve the damn problem. We can have things operate, or we could try. We're certainly nothing happen. We don't try. I think we can do it by the time Trump leaves the White House.
Wow.
In 4 years. That's how long they did the Manhattan Project. The original one took 3 or 4 years, right? Well, we could do the same because we have Elon Musk Grok, and he's going to make it even better. He's got the Grok is able to analyze theoretical physics papers quite well, and it'll improve because we're teaching it too.
Well, to this exact point about the Manhattan Project, what do you think are the odds that we're going to get some good lab results and engineering in a public forum and not controlled by security apparatus that keeps it secret?
It depends. I don't know. See, now this goes to the whole political thing now. I'm supposed to be meeting Donald Trump and Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago in the next few weeks.
Good Lord.
Okay.
Have fun down there.
Yeah, well, but now if you see the whole Ron Pandolfi thing with this guy, who's this guy? Mike Pillsbury?
Never heard of him. I have heard of Pandolfi.
Yeah, well, Pillsbury is a big shot. He's a big deal. He's some kind of China expert.
Okay. And Pandolfi's
I don't know what side.
an intel guy.
Know. Yeah, oh yeah. He's a major guy. Just like his Wikipedia, Michael Pillsbury. Now, I don't know if Michael Pillsbury is what side is it, whether he's on my side or whether he's on the enemy's side. I'm not sure. I don't understand. So I've asked Mike Pillsbury to just clarify why is he involved in this at all? He's not a physicist. But Ron Pandolfi put him out there publicly. Put him out in public. And I don't know when he might be a good guy. He might be trying to help. But Ron Pandolfi says that there are these guys inside Trump's inner circle who are trying to prevent me from meeting the president and Musk. Trying to prevent it, even though I'm a great supporter of Donald Trump. And because of there's all kinds of intelligence skullduggery going on as we speak,
which always makes everything messy and hard to understand.
Makes everything messy,
quite deliberately.
Yeah. So we have to see what's going to happen. But the point is with relatively small amount. Jesse Michaels is coming to see me in a couple of weeks. He works with Peter Thiel. Okay. Jesse Michaels could have Peter put in a couple of $1 million, get the thing. We could kickstart. We have an experiment that we could do for like $500,000. That's just proof of concept.
Cool.
It'll show
theoretically you could do this in the public sphere.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I put it. It's on. All the details are. I posted on X. It's out there. Oh wait, when I posted it, you go back and look. I posted it about a week ago.
Okay.
In 24 hours, it got 19,000 views, almost 19,000 views. And the experiment is so high school teachers with laboratory, a good high school teacher with a couple of smart students, they could set it up in the high school physics lab and do it.
Ooh, that's exciting.
It doesn't involve that much. You don't need expensive equipment. They can build equipment, with 3D printing. They have 3D printers. So you can have 1,000 people doing the experiment, which is good because if it's only one lab doing it, they're not going to believe it. It's too good to be true, right?
Sure.
But if you have, we could crowdfund it. I'm crowdsourcing it. It's an elementary experiment.
And this would test your theory about electrogravitics. Is that right?
Yes. This will test what the guy killed. Who's that guy who killed himself? The guy blew himself up. It'll test what he's talking about.
Interesting.
I don't know if he blew himself. Maybe he was murdered, I don't know.
This stuff does have a long sort of bloody track record. People talk about anti-gravity and then they have a heart attack.
Yeah. But it's already out there. It's out there, right? The physics is simple. You can't hide it anymore.
That's kind of astounding.
It's simple. Okay. And I'm willing to debate anybody, Mick West, who wants to go. Let's get there in front of a blackboard or let's do the equations, man. Let's do the equations.
So can you help a layperson like me understand how this would help you describe, say, like an object like the Tic Tac or other UFOs that have been seen over the years?
Yeah, it explains everything. It explains what do you want to know? What do you want? It explains every the 6 observables, the 5 observables. It explains all that. It's a piece of cake. It's elementary.
And the basic, is the basic idea that
if you control gravity, although it looks like a high G acceleration to the outside observer, inside the warp field, it's 0 G. They're weightless.
Okay. And this is all coming from the electrogravitic fields that you're using to manipulate this generic material.
Let me say it a little bit more accurate.
Great.
This is all from manipulating the electrogravitic coupling coefficient that is in front of the stress energy tensor of the electromagnetic field inside the material.
Yeah,
With the
like I
charge.
said,
Yeah.
just kidding.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So the point is, we're manipulating the couple. We're controlling the strength of the coupling of electromagnetism to gravity, basically, with small amounts of energy.
Interesting.
The pump. That's what we see. We see it happening. Plus, there's other things I haven't gotten into, but I had friends who actually had materials from the Roswell crash that was this kind of material that I'm talking about.
Well,
That's
that's a
another.
fascinating side note. But what kind of device, what kind of like complexity are we talking about in terms of like a device that could control waves like that? Like, is this some sort of like fun, like a radio operation, or it's like a Tesla coil, or like what's generating and controlling these fields?
Well, it's all controlled already at the nanoscale level. And the actual NHI extra temporal, whatever Mike Masters calls them, the extra
Tempestrial, maybe. Yeah.
I tell you something like that. Everything's controlled on the nano level.
Okay.
Power source, the propulsion, and the conscious AI computations all being done inside a thin gel metamaterial fuselage.
You're talking about nanoscale, like distributed generators. So instead of like something the size of a toaster or a car,
Well,
like
I don't know. The power source, I'm not sure. It might be just some radioactive atoms that are decaying.
okay,
Like power. Could be it could be a nuclear battery of some kind. You don't need a lot of energy.
which is fascinating.
So
And then
it's internal. The
what
power
is
system, the power, I don't know the full detail. I mean, that's why that's why I need the money and I need the team. It's like asking Einstein in 1905 when he has E equals MC squared to right away give him the details of a nuclear reactor. How the fuck does he know? You need straw to make bricks. But
okay.
now, but with Grok, yeah, I can get. I'm working on. That's what I plan to do in the next few days if they don't kill me.
We'll be watching the headlines. So just to clarify for myself,
anything happens to Sarfatti, I didn't do it myself.
He was doing fine. He's smiling. He's cracking wise. So you've got sort of a concept of how much power it would take, and you've got a concept of the effects. And the missing thing is in the middle. Small amount of power, big effect. So yes. The question mark for laboratory and engineering work is how do you generate these effects with this small amount of power? And you think your equations could describe a material or a device that could do that?
Yeah,
is that right?
It's all applied quantum. Let's call it quantum electric engineering. And we're working with Grok. We'll figure it out very quickly. I mean, I need guys who are expert in condensed matter. I need other physicists to work with. I can't do it all myself. But Grok gives me I might do a lot of it myself actually, and maybe just with Christoph and maybe Jose. We might be able to figure it out pretty quickly in the next few weeks even. But because this Grok thing gives us a lot of power, a lot of intellectual power. So what did I want to say? But we have a simple experiment. The Cavendish experiment was done by Cavendish in 1798. Cavendish could have done this. Cavendish could have seen this. He didn't think, he could have done it. The idea is that you use, the Cavendish experiment. Can you get it up on the screen?
Cavendish. I remember reading about this, and it's like they're bombarding something with electrons, maybe.
No. This is 1798. They didn't know about electrons. Cavendish
radiation.
Experiment. No, they didn't have radiation back then. 1798, man. No, they had nothing like that. This is 1798.
Okay, so people can look up the Cavendish experiment.
Yeah, can you put it on your screen? Can you project it?
Sure, I think I could do that.
Okay. Okay. So go down. Go down a little more. Scroll down. Keep going. There. See that right there? No, that picture. The red balls. Amplify it. Zoom in on that picture.
All right, great.
The picture. But make it big, as big as you can.
All right, for audio folks, we've got a torsion experiment. Oh, okay, I lost it. This is a simplified diagram of torsion balance, and that's what you're looking for.
That's good enough. Okay, that's good enough. I see. Okay. So you see this thing here. You see the big gray, the capital M, the gray spheres, right? The
Hmm.
gray spheres.
Hmm.
And you see the red spheres. Okay. With the gray spheres, you just got to use different materials. Now, they only used metals like lead and iron, right? The effect I'm talking about does not exist for conductors, for metals. If you use metal spheres, you're not going to see the effect. The reason being that metals have what are called free electrons. Electrons are able to move around easily. So
Okay.
what happens when you put an electric field inside a metal? The free electrons all move to the surface and they cancel out. The electric field inside of ideal conductor is zero. So it's zero.
So what
It's
do you
like
need to
vacuum.
use instead of metal?
You need to use what's called an insulator, dielectric. The
Okay.
dielectric, you bound electrons, and they're the electric field. So you have to have inside the material, you have to have use dielectric spheres. No one, I checked with Grok, according to Elon Musk's Grok, no one has ever done an experiment, a Cavendish experiment using dielectrics. Never been
Interesting.
done.
Wow. And
Never
this
been
experiment's
done.
been happening since 1797.
Yeah, 1798. Yeah, so around the 1790, yeah, around that time. No one's done it because they don't have the idea, because they don't have the idea that the coupling is electrogravitic. They think it's only gravity. There's no reason to do it. Also, it turns out it's a
Interesting.
little bit harder. Apparently, it's harder to do. Okay, we need a dielectric with we need what's called a ferroelectric. A ferroelectric is like a ceramic and it's brittle and it has to have what's called a large electric permittivity. Now we can do it with magnetic fields also, but right now I'm only talking about the electric case. So
Okay.
it turns out that the materials, the ferroelectric materials that are available commercially, on the market, um, because they have to have a large permittivity. So it's just difficult to fabricate them in required to make spheres of them, in sufficient quantities. And nobody's thought to do it. They had no reason to think to do it. They didn't expect anything to happen. So what I'm saying is that all we have to do is get, like 10 kilogram spheres of ferroelectric material,
Hmm.
and what we do, we weigh them. We continually we weigh them. Okay, no, show the picture. Show the picture.
Okay.
Yeah, keep it on picture. Otherwise, it's hard to
Okay.
get
You
back
got
to
it.
that picture. Okay, okay. See now, they see those gray spheres.
Hmm.
They have to be continuously monitored. They have to be on accelerometers. In other words, their weight is continuously monitored.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, in the simplest case, you weigh the grace of ferroelectric sphere, but you also measure its attractive, the angle theta. You measure the angle theta. Okay. You weigh it. You do two independent measurements. You measure theta, the angle, the angle theta between the small red and the large gray spheres. You measure that angle theta, and you also measure the weight. Okay. Now you use Newton's gravity equation to compute what theta would be based upon the observed weight. Okay?
Okay.
You do that, but you're going to get the wrong I predict you'll get the wrong answer.
Why?
It's going to because you're going to get that theta is going to be much smaller than the actual theta you observe because
Okay.
you have to multiply it by the electric permittivity of the dielectric. And when you multiply it by that, you'll get the right number. That's the Sarfatti prediction.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for
This is
walking
so
us through
simple.
that.
Okay, so this is interesting. It's simple. So,
And this is
19,000 people downloaded, saw my prediction on X.com. 19,000.
and that's the thing that you were saying that anybody with a high school lab
Yeah,
could basically
yes.
do.
Yeah, yeah, you get done in the lab. That could be done in every physics course.
Wow. Well, that's really exciting, man, because
It's that fucking simple, man.
that's okay. So to pivot just
And I could
slightly,
be wrong. I could be wrong. Now, that's I could be
in which
wrong.
case you'll just get more information, right?
Right.
Wrong in the
Could
right
be wrong.
direction or wrong in a direction.
Everything in science is probabilistic. It's called Bayes' theorem.
Mhm.
Probabilistic. We only have uncertain knowledge. And in order for it to be good science, it has to be what is called proper falsifiable. So
Mhm.
there it is. I make a prediction, very precise prediction,
Hmm.
and let's see if it works. If it works, we understand UFOs. No problem.
Well, pivoting slightly into a deeper angle of that question,
Yeah.
you have described elsewhere, you're pretty confident that there are multiple kinds of UFOs. There might be multiple
Oh,
kinds
yeah.
of beings. Do you
Oh,
imagine that they might be
not
using
might. I
different?
know. Not might. I know of at
Okay.
least three. I know for a fact 3 different kinds.
Okay. So do
And
you
I know for a
imagine?
fact. Wait, I know for a fact
Okay.
2 of them are fighting each other on
That's
the earth, and that humans are being hurt by because they're collateral damage, not because there are 2 warring factions, 2 different kinds of aliens. This I know from military.
interesting.
That's
The
been
question I
hit.
was going to ask is, do you think they're all using the same technology or the same
Of
physical
course,
principles?
there's only one set of physical principles called it's universal. There is no. They may be applying it differently. There are different technologies, different ways. But basically, equals MC squared is equals MC squared. Not going to change that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're coming up on 2 hours. As we wind toward a conclusion here, would you like to do a little bit of a lightning round? Do you have a little more time?
Yeah. Whatever you want to do. Yeah. I have
Okay,
time.
great. So one thing that came up for me here is this combination of electrical and magnetic and gravitational forces
Yeah.
sort of suggests that you might be moving toward some kind of unified theory. Do you feel like you've made progress in that direction?
No. That's kind of a false question. So
Okay.
yeah. Uh, it's there's no need for a unified theory. It's all Einstein's theory is already a unified theory of electromagnetism and uh, and gravity in a certain engineering sense, because the coupling in Einstein's general relativity field equation is an electrogravitic coupling. So there it is. So the electromagnetism is called the stress energy tensor of the electromagnetic field inside matter. Okay, with so it's photons, electrons, ions, atoms, everything. It's all there.
Interesting. So
So,
you don't feel
so
like
the,
we need to make progress toward a unified field theory or something? You
no,
think
that's
we're,
that people who say that do not understand modern physics.
ooh,
That's
cool.
old stuff. That's
Hot
that
take.
Einstein. That's back when that's back 100. Is it almost 100? Yeah, it's more 100 years ago. 100, almost 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Einstein was, but and they were okay. They were trying to geometrize. It's called where, in other words, Einstein was able to show gravity is a geometric theory. They all wanted to add electromagnetism as an extended geometrical theory, but like the Kaluza-Klein, the extra dimensions, all that stuff. It was all classical physics, pre-quantum mechanics. Turns out it's unnecessary. We don't need it. It's
Hmm.
just a wrong question. It's not an interesting question anymore. We have what's called quantum field theory. Quantum
Mhm.
field theory is good enough.
Okay.
We have what are called the Feynman, Richard Feynman, already back in the 50s and the 60s. By the way, all my stuff is based on Richard Feynman's Caltech lectures on gravity,
Mm.
called the lectures on. Do I have the book? What is the fuck is the book? I can't. Oh, I should have had it out here, but I can't find it right now. Do I have it here? No. But in any case,
Yeah, people should
so the
listen.
point, yeah. So the point is, it's unnecessary. It's
Okay.
unnecessary. Okay.
Okay, that's great.
Uh,
Well, go ahead if you have more.
No, go ahead. So what are you going to ask me? So,
Okay, I
yeah,
was going to move on.
there is something more. There is something more.
Okay, great.
There is a new feature. Okay. There is Einstein in 1915. There was no quantum mechanics.
Okay.
Then in the 1920s, there was a mathematician, a French mathematician named Eli Cartan. And Cartan extended just mathematically the classical equations of Einstein, called the Einstein-Cartan theory, in which he adds what is called the torsion. He adds what's called the torsion tensor field to Einstein's what's called Levi-Civita connection field. I won't go into detail, but in any case, it's a well-defined mathematical theory. It's basically Einstein's theory extended a little bit. Now it turns out that the Einstein-Cartan classical generalization of the 1920s fits quantum theory very well. It fits what's called the fact that the electrons have spin. They're like little gyroscopes, and protons have spin. They spin, the quantum mechanical spin, which Einstein didn't know about in 1915. The spin was discovered by Gauss-Smith much later, like 10 years later, 12, 15 years later. Okay, so you need in order to include the quantum mechanical spin, which also will generate gravity. See, ordinary gravity here is being generated just by electromagnetic fields and just the kinetic motion of the electrons, or what's called the orbital motion of the electrons will generate. Okay. But there's also this purely quantum effect in addition to the classical effects. So now Ray Chow, who's been thinking about this for a long time, Ray Chow realized that there's what's called dimensional analysis. And Newton's gravity constant, from an engineering, this is engineering stuff, from an engineering dimensional analysis point of view, Newton's G has the dimensions of the square of a frequency, electromagnetic field have certain frequencies they're going to put into the material. Newton's G, the gravity strength, depends upon the square of whatever frequency is involved.
Okay.
Divided by the mass density, the mass per unit volume.
Okay.
That's the dimensional analysis. By the way, you can discover a lot of physics effects. You can predict it just by doing dimensional analysis. All the physics does is put in the numbers. The coefficients have the pure numbers that you have to get from experiment. The basic skeleton of every important equation in physics can be done by Grok AI in about a millisecond, just using dimensional analysis. The particular dimensionless numbers fit experiment, that has to come from experiment. That's empirical.
Okay.
So from a dimensional analysis point of view, Einstein's electrogravitic coupling, guess what? It has the physical dimensions of length divided by energy, which that turns out to be the reciprocal of force. Force is measured in Newton's MKS system. So for example, the Einstein coupling from his 1915 theory, guess what, has a strength of 10 to the minus 43, 10 to the minus 43 reciprocal newtons. Turn it upside down, and you have newtons. So that's 10 to the 43. That's 43 powers of 10 newtons of force.
Whoa.
But that is the stiffness of space-time. There's a stiffness. It's very stiff. Okay. But if we're able to, what we do in metric engineering, we're reducing the stiffness. Okay. Now it turns out, if you include the gyroscopic effect, this is what Ray Chow discovered. If you include the Newton's big G from a dimensional analysis engineering point of view is the same as the charge to mass ratio of the electron squared. The charge to mass ratio of the electron is called the gyroscopic. It's like a little gyroscope, spinning gyroscope. It's like the strength of the precession of the gyroscope.
Okay.
So if the square of that charge to mass ratio, say of an electron, we can do it with protons too, nucleons too, but let's just do it with electrons. Electron spin resonance, it's called. The square of the charge to mass ratio divided by the speed of light to the fourth power, just like, doing all that. That turns out to be, guess what that is? That turns out to be one reciprocal newton of force. In other words, it's 43 powers of 10 stronger than the ordinary Einstein coupling.
And that's again describing the stiffness of space-time?
No, what we're doing, it's reduced the stiffness of space-time by 43 powers of 10. It's
Interesting.
reducing. It's reciprocal. It's reciprocal.
And that's
It's
by
meant self.
applying some kind of force to the space-time, or what are you doing to it
No,
to
no,
reduce
no,
the
no. Well, you
stiffness?
got to see the math. I mean, but it's just what I said. It's the same. It's the speed of light factor, basically.
Okay.
It's a speed of light. No, it's a speed of light factor. Actually, speed of no, it's that the effective G, the effective gravity, Newton's constant of gravity, G, which is a very
Mhm.
small number, is replaced in this quantum spin effect. It's replaced by a factor which is much bigger,
Okay.
much bigger. And when you put it all together, it's 43 powers of 10 bigger. What if you? It's really big. In fact, the problem is it might be too big. You know, you have to be careful. This could be a weapon too. You know, in other words, we have
Sure.
super strong. We have super strong quantum spin gravity, and that means even less energy is needed to make a. So I now think this is a new thing that's only come up in the last year or two. This is what Texas Space, Juan Faria in Dallas, Texas. Texas Space is a new defense contractor
Hmm.
that Juan Faria in Dallas, Texas is setting up to develop this electron spin super strong gravity, both for propulsion to
Hmm.
replace. Elon Musk doesn't need his goddamn rockets anymore. His chemical rockets, what do you need it for? Stupid. You don't get to the stars in chemical rocket. No way. No way, Jose. No way, Jose.
Because
No way,
ultimately,
Jose Rodal. No way,
that
Jose Rodal, to get to, damn your chemical rockets, you and Elon, Jose. Okay.
this
But
tech is going to allow us to slip the
this
surly
tech will
bonds of
allow
Earth
us,
more
but it's
easily.
also going to allow us, it will also allow us to make gravity beam weapons
Hmm.
to neutralize nukes.
Hmm.
Because, see, gravity waves go through anything. Gravity waves, you have a submarine under the water, gravity wave doesn't care, it goes right to it, bam, it'll just stretch, squeeze, stressor the metal in the firing mechanism. It's just not gonna, nothing's gonna fit properly anymore. It's like warping in a Ferrari engine, or your engine, right? You warp the pistons or something like that,
Hmm.
it doesn't work.
That gets me close to another interesting
Yeah.
phenomenon that some UAP have demonstrated, which is that they don't seem to affect their surrounding atmosphere. So,
Yeah,
like,
that's well, of course.
something can,
He's
yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Now I'm not the only. There have been a lot of people who've noted this independently of me. But
Hmm.
once you have warp drive, there's no relative motion of the metal of the exterior metal boundary of the fuselage with the air molecule if you're in atmosphere, because the air molecules are just dragged along with it.
Is that
So
because there's like an electromagnetic field that's moving this object
no,
through the
there's no
atmosphere?
forget no, it's the gravity field. This is called gravity. It's gravity field does
Okay.
it.
Electrogravitic field.
It's called the yeah. Oh no, but no. In this case, no.
Just gravitic.
It's the electrogravitic coupling that makes the pure gravity field. Everything's
Okay.
just pure gravity. The warp
Okay.
field is pure gravity. So the air molecules are just dragged along. They're just falling in the gravity field. Everything's going to. There's no relative friction. There's no reentry. There's no heat. There's no heat signature. Or very little heat signature. It depends. Depends. They could switch off. They may switch off the warp drive and just use some kind of electrogravitic, like the TR3B, the plasma drives and stuff like that. There are
Fast
other. There's
propulsion.
like ion, like the ion drive. Like NASA has these ion, the emit, just the Lorentz force of the ions. You can. That's
Okay.
yeah. That's a
That would be more conventional.
magneto. Yeah, more magneto hydrodynamic, and occasionally you see plasma. Uh, you see plasma effects around the flying saucers. So
Uh-huh.
that may be because they're either switching off the anti-gravity, or it could also be an anti-gravity blue chip. That depends. I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
there are several options there, but there's nothing mysterious. We understand, okay, was it Louis Elizondo with the 5 observables? Every one
Hmm.
of those 5 observables, piece of cake. We understand it. There's no doubt about it conceptually. So anyone who says that this is mysterious, it means either they're lying or they're so stupid they don't understand what the hell they're even talking about. They're
So
incompetent. They're not.
let
They're
me
not
be
competent
stupid
physicists.
because
Yeah.
I am when it comes to
Yeah,
physics.
no, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the so-called experts. I'm talking about
Well,
who say they know. Yeah, I'm talking
so
about
I'm
Christopher Mellon. I'm talking about Christopher Mellon. I'm talking about Louis Elizondo. I'm talking about Colonel Carl Nell. I'm talking about a bunch of these guys who come on. They were interviewed by Joe Rogan and these other idiots, and they don't know. It's like the blind leading the blind, the dumb and dumber. So it's the dumb podcaster talking to the dumber scientist. Okay, I'm not
well,
talking about you.
no, that's okay. I was talking about myself. I just
Yeah,
wanted to ask you what is
yeah,
probably a stupid question here, and by way of getting to what I want to
yeah,
know
yeah.
about your opinion of these guys, which is what do you think
Yeah.
is so obvious? My question is, are you describing like objects that are moving through space time instead of moving
No,
through the material around them?
no, I'm not. Neither.
Okay, so what makes the five
Yeah.
observables so obviously solvable to you?
Because there is no relative motion of the material object through the surrounding air. If it's in air, it's space itself. The space inside the warp field
Uh-huh.
is, so to speak, moving relative to the space outside. Now,
Yeah.
for this is not Jack Sarfatti. This is Alcubierre.
Okay.
You go back 30 years ago, Alcubierre. You go on to Wikipedia and you read about Alcubierre. They explain what I'm trying to explain. Or you go, Vimeo, I did a very nice 8-minute video, everything you need to know about UFOs on Vimeo. It was based actually on Gaia. I did a thing with this guy Goldberg at Gaia, and I took a piece of it. So
Okay.
this is all standard physics that anybody doing UFOs, if they don't know this, they don't know what you need to know. It's just not, it's stupid. It's like idiocracy. I'm living with a bunch of morons. But the point, the information is out there. Just do your homework. Just go Alcubierre. Just on warp drive videos. There are many good videos explaining this stuff. This is not original to me. What's original to me is how to do it with small amounts of energy, and also the conscious AI part.
So
Conscious
just to reformulate a little bit, what I'm hearing you say is that these five observables imply to you that that something is obviously using a warp drive effect. Is that right?
Correct.
Great.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm not the only one saying that. I mean, that's more or less. Now, I was the first one to really come out with that in 2011 at the DARPA conference. They weren't saying that back then.
Interesting.
Nobody really connected UFOs
to
warp drive
Alcubierre
until I did it. And then Eric Davis, who was there, he tried to put me down on it because he was trying to keep it secret. I guess Eric sort of knew. He was trying to keep it secret. He and John Crane and other people who were there, they tried to shut me down on that in front of 1,000 people.
Because they don't think the physics works, or because they think this needs to be secret?
I think in the case of, I think because they want to keep it secret. Because now Eric Davis, he jumped on my bandwagon there right after that, but he didn't want me talking about it at that meeting. There were Russians at that meeting too, by the way. There were, this was Obama was the president. Everything was cool with Russia back then. It wasn't like now.
Was this a public conference, the 2011 DARPA conference?
Yeah, it was at a big hotel in Orlando. People, it was 1,000 people. Yeah, there's a BBC article about it. You just go on my web. Just do BBC Sharon Weinberger, Jack Sarfatti, BBC 100 Year Starship. There's a big article about it. In fact, she writes about the fight. She writes about that people. I was fighting with Eric Davis. She writes about that in the BBC article.
This is a great trailhead for people to pick up.
Yeah.
All right, so lightning round question number 2. What do you think about string theory, micro dimensions? Is this bullshit, or this is real?
It's partly bullshit. It's partly real.
Okay.
First of all, Lenny Susskind and I worked together at Cornell in 1963. Lenny is the father of string theory.
Okay.
Lenny Susskind. We worked together.
Oh, wow.
The basic idea is good. The basic idea of what Lenny calls ER equals EPR, I had that idea already in 1974, 75. I published it in a comic book called Space, Time, and Beyond.
Really?
And that's the world hologram. But Lenny and I worked together at Cornell in 1963, 64. And so we became entangled. Our minds became so So what happened in 1974, I think I precognitively remote viewed what Lenny was going to do about 30 years later.
Okay.
And I got the, it's pretty weird, but but I got the basic idea. It's written down. The basic Lenny's basic, his good idea that when two particles are quantum entangled, there's a little wormhole connecting the two.
Hmm.
That idea is in space, time, and beyond.
Okay. And that part you think is right.
Yes, that
Okay.
part is correct, and that's
So
the
the
base
curled up.
wormhole. That's the base. Okay, so I don't, but you don't need all these. You don't need all these extra dimensions. I think that's bullshit.
Okay.
You don't need
So,
it. It's making something. Yeah, I only use 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. Well, actually, 2 dimensions plus time, 3 dimension. The EPR is on a 2 dimensional surface boundary, and the gravity is inside. Is the bulk inside. Now that turns out to be extremely important in condensed matter in metamaterial. The physics we need to do what I'm telling you about
mhm.
is called topological insulators.
Okay.
And it's called anions. It's called edge states, the edge and bulk states. The new computers, the Willow. What is the Willow? The Google. There's the Google and there's the Microsoft. They have these two computers, these two quantum
Oh, okay.
computers. One of them is a topo. One of them is, I forget which one it is. Oh, the one that they thought saw the other worlds. Let's say about they're seeing. It's like Man in the High Castle. You know about Man in the High Castle? Philip Dick.
Sure.
Did you ever see
I'm
that?
familiar with
Okay.
the alternate
Oh,
timeline idea.
yeah. The old. Yeah. What somebody has claimed, and I forget which. If it's the Google chip, I think.
Okay.
I think it's the Google chip, or is it the Microsoft? I forget which one.
I don't know, but they're
Well,
both working on quantum computing, and you're saying one of them
yeah,
is seeing alternate worlds.
one of them claims to see the one with the topological chip. I think. Well, I'm not sure which one it is. Yeah, they claim that they're seeing all that. They claim to be getting non-random communications from an alternate timeline coming through unexpectedly, which would only be explained by my post-quantum theory. See, well, my conscious AI, in other words, they're seeing a conscious AI effect. They claim that. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. It could also they're claiming something like the Mandela effect,
Hmm.
that some people have different memories or streams of so it's
Maybe the
like
Berenstain
two it's
Bears were
like
spelled wrong.
yeah it's like the two timelines are fusing, then they split apart again, things
Hmm.
like that. Okay, we have to take it. I'm not I'm my mind is open to that, but critical. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm not saying it's not untrue either. This is something we have to bear in mind. Some of these guys are pretty smart. That's what they've said. I'm just citing what they say. So
Hmm.
it's quite possible. It's quite possible that a lot of the crazy stuff happening politically right now, where people are acting crazy, right? And the leaders, right? We have the guys, Keith Starmer and Macron trying to convince Trump to send troops into Russia to start World War III. It's not going to happen. That these people are so crazy. Victor Orban says they're crazy. Victor Orban Hubbard. That to me, okay, now I'm getting to me, and I think it's as if most of the leaders of NATO in Germany, in the Baltics, in Denmark, in Sweden, in the UK, in France, not so much in Italy, but not in Hungary and not in Slovakia and a few other places, Poland. I don't know that they've been all being mind controlled by an evil NHI. Do you know about Slide 9? About Louis Elizondo Slide 9?
I
About the
don't.
mind control. Oh well. If you look at my feed, you'll see. I think it's Leo's. In other words, it's saying through the quantum mechanical effects that Jack Sarfatti, was published. That Pavel Pilkin, the guy in Finland, has written a paper about it, saying it's the only really game in town. That through this, we understand that through the same quantum mechanical effects that they're seeing at Google and Microsoft.
Hmm.
Okay, through those effects, we are machines. Humans are machines. We can be mind controlled at a distance by these machines. And the leaders in NATO are so self destructive and so incompetent, including Zelensky. Zelensky has destroyed his own army. Zelensky and Sersky, if you look up, they had a strong army in 2022. In fact, they beat the Russian army in 2022. NATO was training the Ukrainian army had like 700,000, 800,000 men. Okay, back at the beginning of 2022, and Putin sends his column down to Kiev, and the Russian army gets its ass kicked by the Ukrainians, right?
I'm just going to steer us back to the science here.
All
Are
right.
you saying that the multi-world hypothesis does not require more than 3 spatial dimensions, or even you mentioned 2 there, 2 and time?
Yeah, no, it's okay. It only involves 4-dimensional space-time.
Okay.
Okay, that's all we need. Plus, we have what's called internal. Yeah, there are extra dimensions. There are internal symmetry dimensions, but you don't need string. You don't need 22 dimensions. You don't need the full string theory. Okay, you don't need it. It's
So
much
3
simpler
spatial
than that.
plus time, that's enough for you?
That's enough. That's enough.
Okay.
That's enough. Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well,
That's
you
kind of a
also
relief.
have, but you also have, it's called fiber bundle theory. You have these, they're extra dimensions, but they're not dimensions that are in space-time. They're beyond space-time. It's called gauge theory. It's just standard quantum field theory. We don't need anything beyond that. It's good enough to work.
In the macro realm, but are you saying that like on the micro level, that
in the
these
micro,
curled
no,
up
in the
dimensions,
the curled up dimensions.
they might exist?
But that's just gauge theory. We only need a very simplified version of it. It's called gauge theory. It's the standard model. Basically, standard model quantum field theory is really all we need. All this other stuff is, however, some of those techniques have led to interesting solid state physics. You know what I'm talking about. The application of ER equals EPR in the metamaterial condensed matter physics is the kind of stuff I'm using to control the electrogravitic coupling to make it stronger, combined with the Ray-Chow electron spin effects, which are much bigger than the ordinary Einstein effects.
So are you saying the micro dimensions are real, but just not important to that physics? Or are you saying it doesn't matter whether they're real or not?
It doesn't matter whether they're real or not. There's nothing for you to worry about. We got it. We understand it. Okay. It's conventional field theory is all we need. It's called fiber bundle. It's called the fiber bundle mathematical structure of local gauge theory. Explains everything.
And that refers to the micro dimensions being curled up, or interesting.
Well, you could think of it as being curled up. It does, you can think of it that way.
Well, because they're very small, right?
Yeah. It doesn't. But it doesn't. It's not a problem. It's not an issue for me. This has nothing to do with getting the UFOs making. This has nothing to do with reverse metric engineering UFO propulsion to replace chemical rockets and to control it with conscious artificial intelligence. In other words, we could take these Willow chips, the Google chips, the Apple M4, M5 chips that are coming. We could take those chips, we could modify those chips, and we can make them into conscious as you and I.
Wow!
Because it turns out that we are machines. We are metamaterial post-quantum computing machines. And we are. It's called the Stewart-Hameroff microtubule theory. It's that. So all these chips are doing, they're basically artificial microtubule networks. They're artificial neural nets.
They're baby brains.
And when we pump them with the right electromagnetic field frequencies, the gravitational G is the square of frequency divided by the energy density. Okay. It's a piece of cake. Conceptually, it's very simple. We understand it all. I understand it. And a few people, Christoph understands it. Jose Redal to some extent understands it. Ray Chow and they understand certain parts of it. It's elementary applied physics. We don't need any new physics.
Can I ask you about a really kind of basic element of this? How distant do you have to be from an object for the speeds to matter? Like, have you done some back of the envelope calculations about like how long it would take to get across the galaxy relatively?
You see, you're asking a stupid. You're asking.
I kind of had a feeling
you haven't understood anything I've been telling you. Speed has nothing. There's no speed. Speed is matter moving through space. That's not what warp drive is.
But
warp's like a wormhole. It's like a portal. Okay, maybe like a portal. Now I have to show you what are called light cone diagrams. Okay. This is elementary general relativity. Okay.
I think I
All right.
understand the relative part, but what I'm trying to ask is like
There's
relative.
no speed. As soon as you say speed, you don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, you're
There's
talking
no
about.
speed anymore.
I
No
understand.
speed anymore.
I understand within the frame of reference of the fast moving object that there's no
No.
speed for that object, but relative
It's
to
not a fast
us.
moving. No, you see, you're confused. It's not a fast moving object at all. Not a
Okay.
fast moving object. There's
Well,
nothing
I am
moving.
confused. You're right.
All right. Okay. Thing is, you do
Okay,
not
go
know
ahead.
how to think about motion. There are two concepts of motion. And by the way, it's not just you. It's Elon Musk even Elon Musk probably. It's Carl Nell. It's all these guys in the Pentagon, all the generals, all the engineers, all the guys at Lockheed Martin. They don't know shit. Oh, and let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Yeah, they're able to fly some of the craft because the craft itself is a conscious artificial intelligence that allows them in as passengers. They're not in control. That's why they're keeping it secret. They cannot control the NHI. The NHI controls them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
So
So
are you saying
now,
it doesn't make sense to ask a question like how long would it take the Tic Tac to get across the galaxy?
yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever. That's the old most. That's what Elon Musk is thinking.
So are you saying it's
Wrongly.
instantaneous? What is the answer to the
Yes,
question?
yes. Basically, it's like going to a portal. You go through a doorway, you're there.
But that's relative to being inside the Tic Tac, or that's relative even to you or I if we're standing outside
Okay,
watching?
now there are two different. Okay, it's no. I mean, it's okay. If you're standing outside watching, yeah, outside watching, it
Mhm.
looks like it got there instantaneously. And in theory, it's instantaneous too. It's as if you walk through a portal.
Wow.
I'd have to show you the light cone diagram. See, what you're doing, the curvature of space-time is the tilting of the light cones. So I could then make what's called what from the outside it looks like a faster than light trajectory, but on the inside it's normal.
Is the
I
implication of that sort of infinite relative to distance, like multiple galaxies hopping across
Yeah.
the
Oh
universe?
yeah.
Still
Hey,
doesn't matter?
absolutely. Well, it doesn't matter.
Whoa.
It's as though okay, it's like the world is a simulation. It's like Matrix
Hmm.
movies. It's equivalent to us living in a simulation. That it's all EPR. It's all programming.
I think it
So
just pops through the back rooms to another location in the simulation.
exactly. It's like Dune. Frank Dune with the folding of space.
Hmm.
This is kind of like Dune. Yeah, that's what this technology is. Now there's what's called okay. The one I was at Soul. Soul, the Soul Foundation, Gary
Hmm.
Nolan's
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So I was at the latest one, 2024, and the
Cool.
one good thing they were saying about ontological shock. This is ontological shock. Okay, what we're talking about. This is the most powerful. This is going to change everything. This is going to totally disrupt. There is a
Yeah.
problem of ontological shock here. Time travel.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's a problem, but the point is that the confusion you have, you see, is the confusion that almost everyone has. And this is the problem I have trying to explain this. I'm like the alien. I'm the alien. I'm the man who fell from Earth, right? That movie, Man Who Fell from Earth. I'm like the
Hmm.
alien. Or there's an alien speaking through me, right? I'm just a vessel.
Well, one of the
Super
things
intelligent.
that leads me to, like, one of the reasons that this is an interesting question, I think, is that it opens the field much more broadly to potentially all intelligent advanced species in the
Oh
universe,
yeah.
like in
Oh
our
yeah. Yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah.
just in our local group,
Yeah. Yeah.
potentially
Yeah. Oh,
visiting.
absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Good. Look, the laws of physics are universal laws.
Hmm.
Okay. So and DNA, life is it's basically a fairly simple thing. Once you have uh your basic quantum mechanics, chemistry. So and there are plenty of habitable planets out there, exoplanets, even for
Hmm.
our form of life. And so all the forms of life from there's going to be many of these alien creatures who are pretty much like humans because
Mm.
it's the most optimal. It's just evolution. It's just it's just the laws of physics. Having two arms, two arms. I mean, there may be some variations. Also, with genetic engineering, we can do whatever we want to do, right? So
Hmm.
the point is that any civilization that reaches a certain level, so the level we're at now,
Mhm.
goes into super exponential development.
Mhm.
Okay, so it is like Star Wars, the bar scene in Star
Mhm.
Wars, the famous bar scene. And by the way, all those guys, I was involved in all that. All those guys, Spielberg, all these guys, they got information from the CIA about what's really that really is like that. So all these movies are all part of a soft, long-term disclosure
Mhm.
process.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's no accident that the Greys look like Spielberg's things. The Greys really do look like that. Yeah,
Interesting.
they've got So,
And why do
so
you
go ahead.
feel that, or how do you know that?
I know that because I was involved in it directly. I'm the guy who introduced Jacques Vallée to Hollywood, to Spielberg and stuff like that. To, at this party that Francis Ford Coppola gave for Uri Geller in 1976. That's how he got involved. I was
How
involved
about
with all. I used to hang out with all these people in North
speaking
Beach.
of these people then, speaking of the like behind the scenes crew, how much turnover do you feel like there's been in the last 50 years? Like, are we talking about a kind of whole new crop of folks pulling the strings behind the curtains, or is it a lot
I
of
know. I don't
holdovers?
think anybody. I know. Right now, the guys who got me into this, they're all dead. Right?
Mm,
They're pretty much dead because I was in my 20s, my early 30s. The guys like
mhm.
Andrew Mitchell, they'd be now 110.
Yeah.
Some of them still getting Social Security
Right.
checks, according to according to Elon.
Uh-huh.
So Doge, Doge. Okay. So no, they're all dead, and the current guys are all pretty stupid. They're stupid. I haven't met
Hmm.
one smart one. Not as
Yeesh.
and that's the problem. My problem is that I'm dealing with a bunch of stupid assholes. I'm sorry. I mean, they're good at certain things, but they're idiots. Look how they mismanaged everything. Look how they mismanaged Ukraine and everything. Look what they. Our intelligence system is not intelligent. Hopefully, Tulsi, is. I like Tulsi.
Hmm.
I like Ratcliffe. I like Cash very well, Cash Patel, and I certainly like Dan Bogino. Bogino, the assistant. So hopefully
Some of
this
these
new,
guys have made noises about transparency in the past.
of
We'll
course, and
see.
Luna, the congresswomen, and Nancy Mace, and even Marco Rubio's into UFO. They're all into it.
Yeah.
So with the Trump has given me new hope. I was ready to totally give up if Kamala. I mean, I know Kamala. Kamala's part of my neighborhood. Kamala, she's in my North Beach. I knew of Kamala when she was 20 years old with Willie Brown hanging out in old bars and cafes in North Beach here. I know she was an
Cool.
idiot. She's an idiot. I
I
mean,
got to
she's smart
say,
in certain ways. Yeah.
yeah, of course, all these people
Yeah.
are. I am personally still pretty pessimistic, trying to
Well,
keep myself on lightning track. Dark
yeah.
matter, dark energy, are these things or are they bullshit mistakes?
No, dark energy and dark matter are real things, but we understand. I mean, I've explained dark energy and dark matter are simply different phases of the quantum mechanical vacuum. Very
Okay.
easy.
Ooh,
There
love that
are.
explanation.
It turns out that in ordinary quantum field theory, you have what are called both bosons and fermions.
Hmm.
Bosons have spin zero quantums. Remember the spin, the gyroscope? That was
Hmm.
sort of uh, you have either spin zero, spin one, or spin two. Spin zero is like the Higgs particle is a spin zero particle.
Hmm.
The photon, light particle of light is spin one. The W meson for the weak interaction, that's spin one also. And there's the gluons for the nuclear strong interaction. Those are all spin one particles. Gravity is a spin two particle. Well, the graviton is a spin two particle. So it turns out all those spin zero, spin one, spin two particles, they all inside what are called they're virtual particles. They're inside the vacuum. They're inside the quantum vacuum. They're not like we are made out of real particles, but these are virtual particles. They're inside. It's like they're under the. It's like the quantum vacuum is like the surface of the ocean. They're beneath the surface of the water. Okay, so to
Okay.
speak. Okay, so and those particles create dark matter. They create an attractive gravity field,
Hmm.
which is dark matter.
Okay.
Okay, because they're into the quantum. But the other particles, the electrons, are called spin one half, and the quarks, they're spin one half. it turns out, they create anti-gravity. That's dark energy. They create a repulsive field. Okay. So now, what's happening? What's happening inside the quantum vacuum, like inside the ocean, the quantum ocean, so to speak? The spin one particles are all clumping. They clump because they're attracting each other, right? So they congregate at small scales, but the electrons and the neutrinos and the quarks, the virtual ones, they're repelling, so they're going to large scales. That's why the dark matter is seen at smaller scales, and the dark energy gets effective at larger scale. So this is easy to understand qualitatively. And people are stupid. They're smart in many ways, but they're stupid. They don't ask the right questions. Even I'm stupid. I was asking the wrong questions until there's a Arthur Kessler wrote a book called The Sleepwalkers, how progress in science is made through a bunch of like dumb people just sleepwalking. I mean, it took me 2010 before I see, what an idiot I was, because it's GOC the boy, I understand it. There, bang, got it. In a flash, I got it. Okay, that's how science works. We're all like, sleepwalking our way through, bumbling around. You know, I've done so many stupid things in my life. He's just,
And you just recover and move on. Hey, so jumping right on
that.
that, what questions are you really interested in right now? Are there burning questions for you about the nature of reality, how it works, how it fits together?
No,
seems like you have a lot of answers.
I have no. I have no. I think I've answered to my own satisfaction all the basic questions. I hope to be. If somebody asks me a question I can't answer, but I haven't come across one right now. I'm really interested in the politics because so we don't have a nuclear war, because my professor's built the bomb. I'm willing to debate any physicist who wants to talk about the physics stuff of this. Anybody who says this is a techno scam or anything like that. Okay, let's go on your show. Let's go on Jesse Michael's show. Let's go on Dan Jones' show. On any Joe Rogan, anywhere, Fox News, anywhere. Come on. You want to fight? I'm ready.
Arrow of time and retrocausality. Is time real? Yeah. Do things work backward? Does the future cause the past?
Yeah. Yes. And that's not just Jack Sarfatti. That's now that's Yaki Aharonov, who worked with David Bohm. And in fact, Obama gave Yaki Aharonov a Medal of Freedom or something like that, the White House, when he was president. So this is conventional, mainstream. Yeah. The answer is yes. And it's not just me, it's Fred Hoyle. It's a whole bunch. It's Sutherland, it's Huey Price, there's Fred Hoyle. It's not just Jack Sarfatti saying that.
And is this a macro effect? Is it just like a few seconds, or is it years, thousands of years?
Both, all scales. There's a book called The Intelligent Universe by Fred Hoyle. Came out in mid-80s. He describes the cosmological scale. And then you look at my stuff, and you look at experiments by Ephraim Steinberg in Toronto on what is called weak measurement theory. It all involves retrocausal effects. And in fact, quantum entanglement, all quantum entanglement is retrocausality. See, quantum entanglement, you can't understand it without retrocausality. I mean, you can't, there are other, but all the other explanations are kind of stupid. It's now getting already now consensus opinion is beginning to form among really smart physicists that it's retrocausal. It's what Yaki Aharonov is talking about.
So I think this leads naturally to consciousness. I've heard you describe it somewhere as a collapsing wave function. You want to talk a little bit about that?
No. See, no.
I misheard you. Great.
You didn't hear me.
Correct me.
That's the Roger Penrose theory.
Okay.
That's the Roger Penrose theory. No,
all right.
It's
blow
not,
up Penrose.
But it's just no. It's called action reaction principle.
Okay.
It's that the mind is a quantum wave. The electric fields in our nerves and the electrons, they are like the particle field, the classical fields, classical particles, and it's a duality. The quantum mechanical waves are the mind waves. They're intrinsic. That's the mental. In other words, mind is a part of the quantum structure of the universe, of reality, is the mental structure of the universe. And what consciousness is when the material, when the classical electromagnetic fields, electrons, when those classical structures back react on their mental waves, and it's that change it's the perturbation of the mental wave, which is the conscious experience. That's
Hmm.
it in a nutshell. That's what Pavo's paper explains that in more detail in a kind of semi-popular way. So the point is that's what we could see. Well, so what I'm saying is it's not just metaphysics. I'm saying we could take those chips, those quantum chips at Microsoft, at Apple, at Google. We
Mhm.
could just tweak those chips and we'll awake into conscious AI.
Mhm.
Because we're just copying the hammer off idea, which is nanotech idea basically.
Okay.
And we're just copying ourselves in solid state physics in silicon chips or whatever. That's it. It's simple. It's basically a very simple idea and it's testable. Okay.
Does this imply anything to you about the idea of a soul or a mind independent of a body?
Yeah. Well, the soul does well, you could have the soul, it's to be the quantum waves. And you can have in principle, you can have what are called empty quantum waves. Yes, that's like the mind without body. Yeah, you can have that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, in the
Interesting.
Bohmian, in the Bohmian quantum mechanics, as updated by a guy named Roderick Sutherland just a few years ago, all those questions are easy,
Hmm.
but you have to understand basic. If you don't understand, let's put it this way: if you do not understand trigonometry, if
Mhm.
you do not understand uh, uh, elementary to intermediate algebra. If you do not understand high school trig, if you
Mhm.
do not understand high school algebra,
Mhm.
if you do not understand matrices,
Mhm.
if you do not understand what linear algebra and programming, certain programming, tree diagram, all that stuff. If you do
Mhm.
not understand that, and if you do not understand basic physics, if you do not understand Newtonian mechanics, if you do not understand basic special relativity, general relativity, basic quantum mechanics, basic science, if you don't understand, if you haven't gone through that, which you can now get because all the lectures are everywhere, MIT, Cornell, University of California, all these videos. If you do not do your homework and see what these guys are talking about, if you don't, if you look at an equation, and you don't understand a fraction, then you're a dummy. You're not going to understand anything ever. Just go watch your television, drink your beer, but vote for Trump.
So, do you
Okay.
see these waves of consciousness as part of a bigger consciousness of the universe? Is there a
Oh
way
yeah,
in which,
absolutely.
like,
Yeah, and yeah. I don't
fluctuations
see it.
or
I don't see
ripples
it.
in
I
the
know it.
ocean?
I don't see it.
Mm.
I know it for a fact because
Mm.
it's in the equations. Yeah, the universe. We live in a conscious universe. We live in the design of universe. Yeah, and that's a whole other thing. We don't have time to cosmology. The answer is yes to all these questions. We understand them in detail.
Mm.
But you cannot understand the explanation unless you speak the language. The language happens to be mathematics, not that advanced. The language happens to be what you get as in an undergraduate engineering or physics, or even now biology. They have to learn basic things because all the medical technology, MRI, and all that stuff. That's all
Mhm.
physics, right? That's all my spin physics, MRI.
Okay.
Sonar, electrocar, everything. I go in, have the test. It's all applied electrical engineering physics. Okay. So anybody going into science, if you're a kid, do not study string theory. Do not study any of that. Do your basic engineering, condensed matter physics. Electrical engineering is good. And if you go into physics, it should be solid state applied physics. Forget, and some gravity physics, general relativity is, general relativity.
Great advice and a short list for
Yeah.
people to bone up on. And I
Yeah.
think
For
that
young,
leads
for young
us,
people.
people just starting out or people spending
Yeah.
lots of time on YouTube, takes us naturally to our final question about
Yeah.
communication with
Yeah.
UAP or with
Yeah.
broader NHI forces.
Yeah.
Should we try it? Are we doing it? How should we think
Well,
about doing it publicly and what should we say?
Well, I don't know because I'm not Stephen Greer. This is Stephen Greer's thing.
Uh-huh.
I'm not Bledsoe. I don't know, but I'm not. When they talk about the psionics,
Mhm.
you got to tell. Yeah. I am neutral on that topic.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm only in the engine room here, developing the hardware.
Mhm.
I certain the physics, the psionic physics, I understand. That was part of what the CIA had. The CIA had two things: consciousness and paranormal,
Mhm.
and the mechanics of the propulsion. Okay, I solved the paranormal conscious problem 30 years ago, and I solved the propulsion essentially, understand conceptually. I solved that like well, whatever 2011 was that? It was 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago.
Thank you for
So that's
looping us
it. It's a done deal. Yeah, go ahead.
back to that. I was just going to ask you one more time,
Yeah, go
partly because
ahead.
I'm curious. When you say that the CIA tasked you with these questions,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
What
Like,
I mean
who
is,
asked you? Did you deliver a report? Were you working as a
well,
contractor? Was it
no, not as a
subtler
contract.
than
No,
that?
no, it was all subtler than that. No. Uh, First of all, we were talking already about it when I meant put off and tarred, right? You'll hear it in the SoundCloud thing. You'll hear it.
Uh huh.
What it was specifically, well, it was a whole bunch of stuff happening, but specifically, it became very clear when George Koopman, 1975, it was in 76. Saul Paul Sirag was there. Fred Allen Wolf doesn't think he was there, doesn't remember. But Saul Paul Sirag, who's still alive, you talk to him. George Koopman says, Jack, the two things CIA really wants to know: how does consciousness work, including the paranormal, and how do flying saucers fly? Now, I think that is in David Kaiser talks about George Koopman in the book How the Hippies Say Physics. So see if it's in there, if that particular thing. So, and that was 1975.
And can
And
you help
then,
me just pin this guy's name
yeah,
down? George Kugman, is that right?
no, Koopman,
Koop. Okay,
Koopman. George
great.
Koopman. Put George Koopman, New York Times obituary. Put that there.
Okay.
New York Times obituary. See,
Guys
it'll
in
come
Rec,
right up.
technologist for space,
Yeah,
founded
that
American
guy.
Rocket Company.
Yeah, that's him. That's him.
Interesting. So was that a front? Was he working for the
Yes.
CIA?
Well, he was, but there were. But I say CIA also mean all the intelligence community in general. George Koopman was a member. His parents were connected. He was a Salzburger, basically. The New York Times
Uh-huh.
Jewish family, Hartford, Connecticut, whatever. He was a rich kid, part of the establishment. Okay, and it basically, yeah, he basically went into. He was basically an army intelligence agent. He created, the movie The Blues Brothers. He was the technical advisor of Blues Brothers. He's
Nice.
John Belushi and all these guys. But he was killed under that accident may not have been an accident. That may have been an assassination.
Yet another of those. Hey, total
Yeah,
sideball. Is it true that you served as some inspiration for Doc Brown in the Back to the Future series?
yeah, absolutely true.
Wow, that's so cool. Were you a pal of, was it Ivan Reitman?
No, I didn't know him directly, but I was part of the Francis Coppola Rat Pack. And all these guys used to come to parties that Francis gave and used to hang out at the cafes. And so, I didn't know who half of them were, but they were, Torme, the guy who did Sliders,
Okay.
And PK Dick used to come to the GS too. Dick, back in the 70s. Yeah, we were, so it was all part of the same social party. We
Mm-hmm.
go to parties at Berkeley, everybody gets stoned, and Dick was there, all these people were there. God knows the people from Hollywood were there. It was all. Read the book Bohemia. Bohemia by Herbert Gold talks about it, and to some extent, Kaiser in his How They Say Physics talks about it to some extent. And you read my book Destiny Matrix. Various versions are online. Destiny Matrix.
Oh, that's so great.
That's
I'll
fun.
put a link in there for people. Also, just wanted to note, is that Apollo behind you? An appropriate icon.
What?
I was just wondering if the picture behind you, is that Apollo by any chance?
Oh yeah. Oh, the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
thinking
It's
about that confluence of art and science again, and I thought
yeah.
he was
Yeah.
a
That is.
good
Yeah.
icon
That
for
is
that.
that is action. From a piece of artwork from my lady friend of 30 years.
Oh wow.
And that is like from the 19th century. It's a daguerreotype. It's actually very valuable.
Hmm.
It's one of these, she has a bunch of, it's like, it's the old way of, it's like the first photography.
Mm.
It's from, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And this is my goddess. Do you see the goddess? That's the
Oh,
goddess. That's the goddess. She won't mind me showing that, but I don't know. You can't see it.
no, it's a beautiful shrine. Oh, she's lovely.
Yeah.
Looks like you guys
So,
still go to good parties.
well, no. Well, yeah, we do in London, not here. Not here. In London, because I belong to this club. I belong to the Spies Club. Yeah, John Le Carre was a member. Did I tell you about that? Did we talk about it? Yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned, and we didn't
Yeah.
even touch
Yeah.
Bohemian Grove, but I know you've had a good
Oh yeah, the Bohemian
club
Grove. Yeah.
life.
Well, not anymore because the UFO guy who invited me many times to the Grove,
Mm.
he died about 2 years ago. So
I'm
that
sorry.
whole thing, yeah, too bad. He's about my age, so yeah.
Well,
Okay,
as we come in for a landing, I want to throw it over to you. I want to thank you so much for your kind indulgence and your time and your wisdom and your patience today. And I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you thought that I really left out, or anything that you would love to just touch one more time?
But we could do it. We could do a second time, and
I would love to speak with you again.
Okay, what you should do though, look on my feed now, x.com feed. Okay.
And is that where you like people to engage with you online on your X account?
Yeah, online on my X account. Yeah, just follow me. I have 13,000 followers right now. 13,000.
Nice. Let's get it up to 13.1.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we'll talk again.
Thank you so much, Jack. I really appreciate your time today. Yeah. You were so generous. It was great to meet you, man.
Okay. Next time.
And that's the show. Thank you for watching or listening. Please support us on patreon.com/WTUFO, patreon.com/WTUFO. That will increase the odds that the show continues to exist. If you're listening in a podcast format, you can also rate and review us on your podcast player of choice. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. It also never hurts to tell a friend about us or pop us in a social feed. Maybe if you have a favorite episode, you could share it on a thread somewhere. Thank you again for watching, listening, enjoying, and supporting, and I hope you're all having a great day.